we're gonna get started. They call this February 20th, 2025 regular open session of the board to order. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have one recognition by Ms. Nara Rollins.
Hello. Hi, I'm Sanara Rollins, and I'm a senior at MRH. And as we approach the end of the month, I want to take a moment to reflect the significance of Black identity and culture. For many people, especially those who are Black, communities face struggles and injustice every single day. Struggles that are deeply rooted in centuries of oppression, from slavery to segregation, still affect us today. In the U.S., systematic racism, economic disparities, mass incarceration, and healthcare inequality continue to hold Black Americans back. These challenges are not accidental. These systems were created and maintained over generations. Education is one area where these disparities are especially apparent. Many Black students attend underfunded schools, and for those of us striving for higher education, there are numerous barriers. These issues are part of a larger system that has historically marginalized and excluded Black communities. But recognizing these realities isn't about dwelling on the past. It's about acknowledging how history still shapes our present and committing ourselves to just a future. As someone who's struggled financially, I know firsthand how tough it can be to access the resources that others might take for granted. I've had to face the challenges of making ends meet, and I know what it's like having to worry about things like whether or not I can afford lunch. That's why I'm so thankful for the ways that MRH has supported me, providing meals and other resources to help ease the burden and allow me to focus on my education. These resources have made a real difference in my life, and I know they have helped many others in my situation as well. While every Black American has various experiences, I'm proud to be a Black woman, and I have deep appreciation for my ancestors and the people who have fought and to continue to fight for the opportunities I have today. The resilience, strength, wisdom of Black people have shaped every part of this country, from music, literature, politics, science, math, and activism. Black Americans are leaders, scholars, and everyday people who have made a lasting impact on our society. Their contributions deserve to be recognized not just in February, but for every day of the year. Through my own journey and the education I've received, including the support I've had from my school, I've come to understand why it's so important to uplift Black voices in every community, and that we need to support Black students and families, challenge the systems that continue to hold us back, and work together to build a future. This is more than just inequitable. This is why Black History Month matters, and is a time to honor the past, reflect on the present, and work toward a better future every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Now moving on to public forum. Anybody? No? Okay, sure. First we have Ms. Rothenberg, Annie, as some of you know her.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Annie Rothenberg. I'm a Maplewood resident of 16 years, a parent of 2 MRH students, a first grade teacher at the ECC, and the president of our local teachers union, the MRH NEA. It has been almost a year now since the MRH NEA's first collective bargaining agreement with the district in many years was approved, and I'm so pleased with how much progress we have made from that point in time until tonight. Last year, on the evening our initial CBA was brought before the board, I spoke about how the agreement was a good start, but shared that I still had concerns about challenges with communication, collaboration, and curriculum that were affecting teacher retention and morale. Tonight, as the board will have the opportunity to approve our new agreement, I'm happy to report that we have made solid progress in those areas thanks to the CBA and the structures we put in place to raise and address issues. In addition, the 2-year salary agreement included in the CBA, which you will discuss and hopefully approve tonight, demonstrates the district's commitment to make MRH competitive with other districts in the area, which will improve teacher retention and morale. Our work as a union, partnering with administration and the board in support of staff and students, is challenging but productive, and I do feel like we're on a good path forward. I appreciate the administration and the board for working with MRH NEA to reach an agreement that will make our district stronger, and I'm looking forward now to turning my attention and that of the unions to supporting Props B and E. Thank you.
Next, we have Ms. Gretchen Schultz.
Nothing like fighting for parking when you're a little bit nervous about public speaking. Hi, I'm Gretchen Schultz. I am the parent of a freshman and a fifth grader at MRH. We've been in the district since our kids were in preschool, and we fully intend to stay through graduation. Our experiences with MRH have been overwhelmingly positive, even with and in part of because staffing changes. This is my main reason for speaking today, to highlight the exceptional teachers my elementary student has had the past 2 years, all 5 of whom were hired ahead of the 23-24 school year. Miss Sarah Payne and Miss Erin Cox came on mid-loop for my child's 4th grade year last year. They stepped into a pair of classes that had had a very challenging 3rd grade year, the one exception to our many positive experiences. I won't go into deep detail at this time, although I have spoken to Miss Elam about it. She's very aware of what was going on that year. But one of my child's 3rd grade teachers was simply not up to MRH standards, and despite the multiple supports Principal Elam offered her, her classroom was noisy, chaotic, and extremely stressful the entire year. Miss Payne and Miss Cox beautifully stepped in, and in addition to being exceptional academic educators, they set healthy, safe, loving boundaries for their students, and it made an incredible difference in my child's 4th grade experience, and I'm sure for the experiences of their classmates. The transition to 5th grade this year was also challenging for my child, but this time it was simply because there were 3 new teachers, new classrooms to navigate, greater academic expectations, and at the time my child was struggling with unregulated anxiety disorder. As our family worked to get the right mental health supports in place at home, our kiddos' 5th grade teaching team of Miss Tara Pickett-Lewis, Miss Madeline Burzon, and Ms. Jeanette Kay met our struggling child with kindness, empathy, and encouragement. And now that we have mental health component in check, I'm happy to say that our child is absolutely thriving in this trio's classes. My kiddo is learning, participating, and speaking up for themselves and for others, which makes this mama's heart so proud. So despite the relative newness of these 5 MRH educators, my child is receiving absolutely a top-notch education, which is the type of education that my family has come to expect from MRH. And we are so fortunate to have added these kind, skilled, wonderful teachers to the team. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2, which is the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve it, please?
I just want to make a motion to amend the regular agenda, which I believe this is where I'm supposed to do that.
Oh, sure.
I just wanted to add to action items. We're going to discuss in study items, number 4, request for legal services. And so I just wanted to add an action item. Should we decide to proceed with that, we can vote on it.
I think we can do that later if we get to the point in
We-
item 4
We
where
can, okay, I
yeah.
just wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, great. Motion passes. We're moving on to study items. The first one is the immigration resolution by Dr. Benita Jamison.
Good evening, board, community. Tonight I am presenting for study the immigration safety resolution to support undocumented students. With the shifts in federal policies and recent executive orders, which have created uncertainty not only societally but also within our district that differentially impact our students in MRH, I thought that this resolution would capture the board's public declaration of support of our undocumented students who reside in the district. I do recognize that it is not a policy, but it is a way for the board to actually show support and express the values that are exuded throughout MRH. This draft resolution has been reviewed by legal and is actually borrowed from the NEA to produce resolutions to support and affirm our students who are undocumented. So the disparities that we talked about within this particular resolution to remove, we have items within the resolution to remove communication barriers, also to provide SEL support and support for staff where needed for those who actually support undocumented students who are being educated in the district. This resolution could differentially impact those individuals who don't possess the same beliefs in regards to the level of support for our undocumented students. And I am aware of that. I did have a conversation with legal, and the only drawback for this particular resolution is that it may draw unnecessary attention to the district, which legal indicated that we have taken very bold stands in several other ways in addition to this particular resolution. This item will come back to the board at a later meeting, and feedback and questions are welcome at this time.
You could add a line for Bailey to go F himself.
Other,
So I guess one concern I had was, it sounds like we're doing the things internally we need to do to protect the students. Is that, from what I'm gathering? And I guess I have a concern of, are we doing this to make if doing this could harm those students further rather than help them, then I guess, is the point of it to make ourselves feel good or to help, right? So I guess that's where I'm at. Like, I want students to know we support them, but I also don't want to do something that unnecessarily puts them further in harm's way, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And you were saying that legal said that most districts, the only place that they're aware of that's done this is Chicago Public Schools.
Is one, and other districts, the closest district that actually has a lot of practices in place would be Rittner.
Okay.
So we have taken necessary steps to actually support our undocumented students. Thank you to Mr. Estrada and several members of the team. So I do think we've actually communicated that. But we still have some fear within our community. So I've received emails and others have as well. So we have not been adverse to actually communicating our support. And in this case, I didn't see it being anything different from other resolutions that we've brought forward.
I am concerned that it is going to draw attention to the district that we may not want, and that will just make things more difficult for undocumented students. And I also think that inside the resolution are sort of the rights of the school district, and then what to do to some degree when ICE might show up at the school district. I think it's far more important for that information to be spread around and to be acknowledged within the different schools so that people know what to do if this occurs.
Do we have to have a resolution to do that work?
Well, we're already doing the work.
Right.
Mr. Estrada, if you can come up and maybe speak to the work that has already been done. I think for me, when I think about the decisions that the board has made and being a pillar within our community, we have not shied away from resolutions that support either transgender students or any of other resolutions that we have around sensible gun laws and things of that nature. But Mr. Estrada, if you can talk about the internal efforts that we've done thus far to support our undocumented
It'll be a summary,
students.
so I don't have all the documents in front of me, but the first week after the new administration rescinded schools and churches and hospitals as sensitive locations, whereas ICE was not normally going to those places, we were getting inundated with questions about that from our immigrant refugee community, and we're also getting inundated with resources and best practices. It really reminded me during the early days of COVID, where just information was coming at us fast and furious. So we got a great team here. They were feeding all the information to myself and Ed, and we were kind of pouring through it and lifting out the consistent messages that seem to be accurate and true and would really support our families. So we did issue, and you guys got a copy of that, kind of our process and procedures, like message to our family about so they know their rights, resources for them, et cetera, a message to the family, the whole community, in fact. Because we were getting calls from everybody, not just immigrant refugee families, concerned citizens, I remember one mom called me and said, what's our ICE policy? I said, well, 2 days ago, we didn't need one, but we do today. So we did two things. We sent a message to the families with resources and support and kind of similar to the resolution here in front of you. And we also internally with our staff, guidance on what would happen if ICE came to our schools, which has been consistent. That was vetted by our attorney. In fact, other districts have barred our procedures a little bit because it's pretty solid. So we were able to lift the best practices. So we have internal procedures if ICE were to come. In fact, they'll be directed here to the central office to meet with Dr. Dietrich and I. And if they have a judicial warrant, we'll give them access. If not, they won't have access. So that kind of gives it in a summary.
Thank you.
No problem. And we're continuing to kind of monitor that. They haven't been coming to schools yet, so we'll see. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Since we've also been, I guess, some action, is that right?
So I can respond to that one. I actually had a conversation with Cindy prior to the board meeting. She said that's just their feedback, but there is really nothing legally we need to do right now. So she basically is telling all of the districts that she represents to sit still until we receive something indicating that we need to make adjustments.
Have we been in touch with other?
Yeah, so there's really active professional learning network with student services folks and superintendents, and so those were hopping those first couple of weeks. And people were saying, hey, if you come up with something, send it our way. So, and Cindy Ormsby, our attorney, represents several districts. So as we were one of the first ones, Ritter probably was the first one out the door because they have a huge immigrant refugee community. So we borrowed some language from them and just national things as well. But when we issued our statement to the community and our procedures, we lent that to other districts to use and to kind of always share that kind of stuff. So it's been consistent with some of the other districts around the region in terms of making those statements and having internal procedures. Most districts have internal procedures for sure. What I did statements that kind of hit and miss depending on what communities they were. So
Some of them are actually working on policies. They have not been completed. And so superintendents meet monthly, and those are the conversations that we're having. So those policies are not yet finalized, but they are looking at policies to put in place within the St. Louis County districts.
So that could embody the rights in the process along with
Right,
these.
right. So the resolution really is just the board stance. The policy, of course, is more of the legal component that would kind of guide what we do for that.
And I mean, I just want to be clear, like, I'm not opposed to this. Like, I am for it, but I just know the information we were given is that it's a possibility if we do this, it could bring harm to those same people we're supposedly trying to help. And so I guess that's what I'm trying to gauge. Do you think that harm is, potential harm is worth it? That the families will need this to feel safe, or are we already doing that work one-on-one?
That's hard to say. I haven't shown them the resolution. We've met with a lot of the families that expressed concerns, had individual meetings with them. That was more problem solving about emergency contact, powers of attorneys, explaining our statement. I will say that the statement that the district issued on our website was greatly appreciated. Right. Yeah, because it opened up conversation and they felt really seen and heard. And that's one of the beautiful things about this place. Yeah. So and that's similar to the resolution. So they did find that statement healing to them and comforting, along with their internal procedures we adopted. But I haven't, we haven't shown them those things. So they trust, a lot of our families trust us. Those kids are all back in school now and feel connected, yeah.
I think that a lot of what's going on with the current administration is just an atmosphere of fear, and the fact that they want to, not that anybody's reaction or concern about whether or not this would have a negative impact on our population, that's certainly a valid concern, but I think it's more dangerous to not say anything, to just say, okay, maybe it'll go away, put our heads in the sand. I think that it's more important just to be like, this isn't okay, stop. That's my personal.
Put our heads in the sand as we're doing the work. I mean,
I understand, but I mean, my whole point is that it's, I feel like silence in a lot of ways is complicity. So that's my feeling.
Vince, I just wanted to affirm on the resolution that one of the things that we do not do currently is collect data on where people were born or
correct
their
status.
So
right. This long-established federal statute from the early 80s, that was 1982, a court case in Texas that prohibits districts from collecting data on citizenship and documentation status. We've never done it. There's no questions about it. We do sometimes, they might share that informally, but that's something, I cannot produce a report that said this is our number of undocumented citizens. That's long established practice throughout the country.
And I recognize that there's a number of people who have legal status in
Yes.
our country that are also concerned right now too. So
Yes.
this is obviously.
Yeah, like we have some families that have come from Venezuela and they were able to get temporary asylum, but now they're going to rescind that, and so it'll expire for them. And so there's a lot of uncertainty in the immigrant refugee community within pockets, so yeah.
I did have some questions about the language itself if we're gonna do it, I guess, on the second page, the second full paragraph, the last sort of part of it, it says, it's talking about any requests by ICE to visit a school will be presented to the superintendent's office. And then the last part, it says, this review must be made expeditiously before any immigration law enforcement agent appears at a school site. Should that be enters a school site? Like, are you saying that, because you don't know when they'll appear at a school site.
So we can change the language for that. Again, this one was adopted from the
Okay.
NEA, so I just lifted it just the
Sure.
way that it was, as my colleagues did. So if we want to, you want me to
Well, I'm
change it?
just not sure what that like how you can know when they'll appear. So I'm just curious, maybe that's a question to ask them, and do
Okay.
they mean
Yeah.
before they come in? And then I guess if we're already doing it, my other question was in the last paragraph, it says after-school providers and other vendors and service providers will be informed. Like, who would vendors and service providers be, and like how do we notify them?
So an example of that would be the Y actually
Okay.
provides services at our campuses. So they would be one, and any other individual that we partner with who would actually be in school, so that they understand that they're abiding by the resolution that we've created.
So I guess in that case, I was hopeful maybe I know it makes it more work, but if we could shorten that 30 days, given how quickly this can become an issue, like I wouldn't want to allow 30 days, maybe 10 would be great if possible, or just so we can let people know as soon as possible, I guess. But those were just my thoughts.
Other thoughts? If there are no other questions, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you.
All right, item number 2, allocation of funds for instructional materials, illustrative mathematics by Dr. Chris McGee.
Hi, good evening, board. I'll invite the team to come to the podium, if you would, to help us out if there's any questions that might come up. I want to give a quick thank you to our team here that put together tonight's proposal and were key at the leadership in making it happen. So Ms. Elam at the elementary building, Ms. Cable at the ECC, Ms. Noby at the high school, and Ms. Ward in central office. So we put together a rationale for adoption. We had a selection process. Teachers throughout the district piloted resources, utilized rubric, and eventually landed on illustrative mathematics by Imagine Learning. And we put together the quote and the recommendation here for you this evening. Any questions that we might be able to answer for you?
Is that a one-time cost? Will there be an ongoing cost?
There will be an ongoing cost, yes. So each year, there will be the online access fee, as well as the purchase of the student workbooks. That will be recurring costs.
About the same amount?
It'll be less than that because their initial adoption has things like manipulative kits and teacher manuals that won't need to be purchased every year.
Thank you.
Was it pretty much unanimously agreed that this was the best route to take from asking the teachers? And
I feel that the two curriculums were similar. And so there wasn't like a hands down, absolutely not the other one, which is a good problem to have, that we had two good curriculums that we both have been, when I say both, I mean pairs of teachers in every grade level have been testing out the two curriculums, so it's not like one was devastated by a poor curriculum choice. But through conversations and looking vertically also, I think that we felt this was the best decision based on
the different areas of the rubric that we had designed from the beginning.
Does it save any time or, take teacher time in order?
Loads.
Loads, yeah. I was
Loads.
waiting, thank you
Okay,
for
so-
saying that.
Immeasurable.
Yes.
Efficiency improvement there too, that gives you more
Completely.
time to do other stuff.
Completely, and then allows for you to dig deeper into your practices because you have something that is thought out, has a scope and sequence, and is aligned with Missouri standards. Now you don't have to do all of that work.
Are there any sort of built-in analytics in the software? Or, I know there are worksheets, but I've never seen this stuff. So is it software-based at all, or?
It does not have like students aren't putting information into it, and it's not doing any calculations or anything on those lines. It is just simply a resource online as well as in print.
Okay, so there's nothing that says sort of, Johnny's having trouble with long division.
Correct.
Okay, there is not anything like that?
Correct. That does not exist. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And you guys piloted it this semester, right? And if I read the data correctly, you saw improvements in math, sort of, throughout?
Cute. Yeah.
Or some success with it?
Yes,
Yeah.
so we did see, again, all sets of students had some growth. There was just more student growth when we looked at scale score for the resource that's being recommended.
Okay, so
So-
it seems to work.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into
Right,
that data and those numbers. Our teachers, the resource is one component, but yeah, it didn't not work, so.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Number 3, Board Policy Badge 2024 by Dr. Vivian Jameson.
Thank you. Tonight I bring forward 11 policies as a result of changes to law or new state statutes. The majority of the changes that you will see when reviewing the policies are a result of Senate Bill 727. 9 of the policies are being recommended as presented by MSBA. 2 of the policies are being recommended with edits. The one policy that's being recommended with edits is policy IGCD, virtual courses. In an overview of this particular policy, basically the changes are districts can no longer deny enrollment for students who are interested in enrolling in virtual classes. The district has 10 business days to make a decision and inform the families of such. And it broadens the right for appeal for those families who are actually participating. The edits that are being recommended for this particular policy include changing the language to say appeals are made by the student or their parents, and that the appeal be made to the assistant superintendent and his or her or their designee. So that's one policy, and then the subsequent policy which goes along with that one is policy IGCDA, which is full-time MOCAP virtual courses. The changes for this particular policy is a result of Senate Bill 727. This one is more so associated with enrollment through the MOCAP program and who actually has to initiate IEP meetings or things of that nature. So the host district has to do that, not the district of residence. And then it also allows for students to be disenrolled in 5 days. The district actually has to provide alternative options. I will say that this particular policy has been discussed with the Commissioner of Education on multiple occasions because the virtual schools have the ability to disenroll students whenever they choose if they feel like students aren't making enough progress, whereas local education agencies such as MRH are not allowed to do that. So we did make some modifications or some recommendations for changes. One is in regards to access to district facilities. Students of full-time host and MOCAP may be allowed to access district facilities, so we are making a recommendation there for that. That concludes my presentation over the 11 policies that are included in the 2024D batch. I welcome any questions you may have.
Let's see, moving on. Item number 4, request for quote legal services.
So I don't know.
Hey, Trent?
You want me to present? We do not currently have a contract for legal services. The last time we signed a contract was 2015. And I think that we should go out and look for alternatives to our legal services and at least look and see what is out there to offer. And so I'm recommending, and hopefully we will vote later on, about putting out an RFP for new legal services.
So what's the problem we're trying to solve for right now? Because we are being represented by legal services.
I at least am fairly dissatisfied with our representation by legal services.
I would also like to say, I think it's important, like, to be fiscally responsible, to have a contract for legal services. When we requested the contract, no one at the law firm could find it. What we were sent was actually an unsigned contract with a different law firm that doesn't exist anymore and was not signed. So I guess I don't even know if that was the last one. And it was from 2015. And so there was also no legal fee provision listed in it. So I don't even know how we're determining what we're paying if we're not bound, it seems. So I guess for me, regardless of who we end up with, it's fiscally responsible to go out and make sure that we have a contract covering those services. That is very typical in a government setting. Usually they last about 3 years, and at the end of that 3 years, you don't have to go out for RFP again. You can just sort of revisit the plan and see if it's still working. So that's why I would like to do it.
So if the issue right now is that for the past, I don't know, 10 years under multiple administrations and boards, we haven't had a clear written agreement, why not just ask for clarity of the agreement that we're currently in?
I would also like to see sort of what other services are out there. I also think we've expanded the scope of the assistance we need. We now have a union. Perhaps what's very common for a lot of districts is they'll use different legal firms for different things depending on their expertise. So I guess for me, I think it would be prudent for us to just go out and see what services are out there. So that's also part of why I would like to at least put an RFP out and see what we get.
Isn't typically an RFP, we would say what services we want as opposed to saying what services people want to offer us?
Right, but we would provide the scope of services, and I like to see what other firms may be out there that may have more expertise in certain areas that could benefit us. So yes, that's how it works, yeah.
I'll just add that when I was at the MSBA training in October, the MSBA, when we got to the section on legal services, it says that every district, their recommendation is every district goes out for re-competition of legal services bid every 3 years. So we are well past that date.
I mean, I haven't seen a request for quote, like proposal here. That seems like in the weeds of day-to-day operations of the organization. So I'm not opposed to putting one together, but I don't feel like that's something I want to do as a knee-jerk reaction to something that is very lightly listed on the agenda. So
this is on the agenda so that we can vote to develop an RFP and put it out. The actual development of the RFP would be done in closed session and under the guidance of the superintendent plus the board of directors for what services and what that RFP would constitute. And we would approve that in closed session for it to be sent out to lawyers for bids and proposals.
And typically the superintendent would prepare it and provide it to us, and we would provide input to make sure it covered what we were looking for. So that's how we'd be working in concert to make sure both our needs are met. So it would be typically how it would work, was my understanding.
Yeah, so, I mean, my only concern is just the timing of this. I think that maybe right now is probably not the best time to do that. If you want to wait till April, that might be a good time to do this.
I think as soon as possible is the best time.
Well, and the reality is it'll take a couple months to do.
Yeah.
Because you have to put it together, then and you also have to go out for bid and leave it out for bid for a certain period of time, and you have to look at the proposals, and then you have to determine who you decided. So it can be a 2 to 3 month process, so I'm not sure.
I understand that, but I think that with everything that is going on right now, I still think it would probably be best to maybe wait until April to do this. That's just my recommendation.
The development of an RFQ or an RFP or whatever we would be calling it would have to happen between now and the next meeting for even just a draft for us to react to. I mean,
Whatever. I mean, again, you know, I don't particularly care. I'm just saying that I think that, again, that would be my recommendation. But, so, I guess if we want to amend this or move this to an action item, can I get a motion to, a motion to move this to action items?
Yeah, a motion to place a vote to provide a quote for legal services to the action, section 7 of the agenda, action items.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Just abstaining. So, I don't know what that happened. I didn't count.
yeah,
So does that pass?
it did.
Okay, cool. All right, moving on. Where were we? Sorry, I was moving around here.
Collective bargaining.
Ah, yes, the big thing. Collective bargaining agreement by Dr. Ambersh Phillips.
Here you go. Good evening, members of the board, parents, community members, and our Maplewood Richmond Heights faculty and staff. I'm excited to present the MRH Collective Bargaining Agreement for the 25-26 and 26-27 school year. I keep going the wrong way. This agreement represents collaboration between the MRH district team and the MRH NEA to achieve our shared goals for employees and for students. I'd like to acknowledge we actually have several MRH NEA members in the audience today. So, like, can you wave your hands? So most of them have T-shirts on. A lot of them, their names are on here, but they gave probably over a month, every Wednesday, for lots of hours. They worked very diligently with the district team to achieve this collective bargaining agreement. So I'd like to thank you for all of your hard work and then also your presence here tonight. So why does the district and the NEA bargain? And there are several reasons for bargaining. First is to improve the teaching working conditions. And so a lot of that has to do with like managing the work hours, the resources that teachers need in order to be successful, and also professional development. Some of the key areas, and you will see in the attachments, you can look under those sections under working conditions, and you'll see that that has to do with plan time, teacher-student relations, communication expectations, evaluations, fair representation, et cetera. So I encourage you to check out that document. The second reason why we bargain is to ensure fair compensation and benefits. And so the goal is to provide, we know, competitive salaries and benefits that reflect the value that our staff actually bring in terms of their contributions. And so some of those areas that we discussed were our leave policies, our extra duty compensations, continuing education opportunities, step credits for advancements for individuals who are coming new to our system, and also additional compensation opportunities. Also, we wanted to enhance the educational quality for students and staff. We know by addressing teaching working conditions and also looking at our staffing allocation in terms of compensation and benefits, that this will actually improve our student outcomes and attract top talent. We also know empowering our educators to collaborate and innovate benefits students greatly. So collaboration together, what are the benefits per NEA? There are three categories listed here. The first is under for our students in our strategic plan, and this is to improve student learning and teaching working outcomes. And these collaborative efforts actually touched on issues like limiting our class sizes, opportunities for teachers and paraeducators to exchange effective practices, prioritizing our health and our safety, and also ensuring educators' input in professional learning plans. The second area is for our people, and this is to attract and retain the highest quality employees. And under this category, this absolutely had to do with our compensation, ensuring that we were compensating our employees effectively, and that we improved higher pay, that we improved the working conditions, and then also that there was that strong mentoring induction programs. And then that third category was the MRH strategic plan. And under the strategic plan, we wanted to make sure that we are intentionally addressing systemic racism directly through the MRH strategic plan. And then also we were embracing a shared belief that every student deserves the chance to succeed regardless of their socioeconomic status or their background. So where they live or how much money they have should not be a determining factor in their success. So what are the highlights? The highlights under the CBA are two-year salary agreement. You will see in parentheses that 4.1 actually takes you to the section in the CBA where you can find that information under. So a two-year salary agreement, reduction in teacher work days. We went from 189 days to 188 contract days. Expanded leave benefits, and so pregnancy, childbirth, and adoption leave, we increased that from 20 to 25 days. Summer curriculum writing and compensation for 10 days. Committee participation, so we added compensation for some pre-identified committees. And then also employee children attendance at MRH. We modified this to align with our current district policy. Also, the insurance coverage education sessions, the committee felt that this was necessary to have a dedicated sessions to increase the understanding of our coverage options. Extra duty contracts, this actually speaks to our athletics and our activities and improving the compensation in those areas. Required evening participation, and so this actually increased from 5 hours to 7 hours, so those professional responsibilities of non-compensated time after hours. And then our STEP credit discussions, again, we agreed on the district side to reopen discussions on STEP credit for the 25-26 school year, and then the dissolution of the emergency leave bank. This is an adjustment that we made based upon our current needs. So the allocations of fund, this is tentative. Where is the money going? First and foremost is salaries. We know that salaries is our largest expenditure, so we want to ensure that we're competitive in our compensation. The pregnancy, childbirth, and adoption leave, we talked about increasing that 5 days. So to be able to support our employees during those critical moments. The extra duty contract schedule, of course, addressing the equity and the compensation there has some salary components to it. The district committee compensation, so recognizing that time and effort for staff members in those predetermined categories or committees where compensation would be in place. And then the 6 PTO days. This was actually an adjustment for the dissolution of the emergency leave bank for staff members who are currently participating in the bank. This is a breakdown in terms of the impact of the budget tentatively. So on this particular slide, you'll see that, again, salaries is the largest increase. We were able to negotiate for 2 years for salaries, so the FY26 shows you what that increase would be for the first year for teacher salary increase, and then you see the cost for retirement and Medicare, so the total cost for that first year is a little over $1.6 million, and then FY27, you see those same categories. It's going to cost more over time, so now we're up to $1.9 million, so the total is $3.5, and you'll see in that first categories, the bachelor's, through the doctoral channel, there's a plus 8% with that 2.75. They get that step as they move on for years of service. And then that second year is bachelor's plus the 6% on that side. And the master's and doctoral skills, those are a little bit higher compensation with 9% still with the salary step. And then at the bottom, those are the committees, and so you see the PDC. That first one is the building leadership team for high school. And then you have middle school, elementary, and ECC, the number of staff members who currently participate, the hours. The contractual amount is $33 an hour. You see the cost, the benefits, because we do pay into benefits for that as well, and then the total cost. And then that last category is our MOT, so the management oversight team, which those committees actually help to support the work of our strategic plan. This actual slide shows you those extra duty salary increases, and so when you're thinking about those activities and then also those athletics, this is the cost budget for FY25. You see the salary and the benefits, and then the projected cost for FY26 is listed there, so there's a difference of about $20,506. And then on the left-hand side at the bottom, you have Healthy Start and tuition support. So Healthy Start, we increased from 20 days to 25 days. So this is the associated cost there. And then although we did not bargain for tuition support, this is mentioned because there has been an increase in UMSL's tuition fee structure. So there's an increase in the rate that the district will have to pay. So of course, that's additional compensation that we wanted to highlight on this slide. And then the emergency leave bank we talked about for the individuals who are currently in the bank. Those are 6 days, 651 days is the estimate, and that is the total associated cost there. So what are the next steps? The voting by MRH NEA, those members have already completed that. Thank you. Pending board approval tonight, so we're hopeful that the board will approve the CBA agreement tonight, and then the communication takes place. And so we're going to communicate with teachers, principals, central office, and the community. It will be posted on our district website, which is also communicated in our HA policy, and then on social media in the newsletter, we'll blast it out in lots of different ways so individuals can also have access to it that way. And then the work doesn't stop there. We're continuing to monitor and then evaluation. So we'll have monthly MRH and admin and MRH NEA meetings. We've just actually wrapped one up last week, addressing any unforeseen issues, and then we'll continue to ensure compliance. And then there will be a review of the training regarding our CBA. We always go over the training with our administrators and then also the teachers and staff as well. So are there any questions that I might be able to answer for you?
I have a question. I'm sorry, this might not be the right time, or the right setting, because it's more of a financial question, so I'm not sure, like, so how, with the substantial raises and the other things, how would that be impacted should the levy not pass? Is that doable for us? Like, what are we looking at with that?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Host.
I did email the board a version of the projections that exclude the additional revenue that would be recognized as related to that 50-cent transfer. Year one would be, we would end somewhere around that 33%. Year two would be right around that 15%. So that's getting pretty low at that point. The first year would be definitely doable. We would indeed be deficit spending again at that point and be further. So the deeper we dig into that deficit spend, the more difficult it is to dig out, but, and I'll present the revenue projections here in a little bit when we go through the first look at the revenue budgets for next year. But yeah, it would be difficult to absorb, but regardless of what happens with that levy, it still is the right thing to do.
I have a question on the summer curriculum writing 10 days. I could not find that in the agreement, so I wonder what that means.
I'll let Mr.
I was going to say, I don't remember the exact page number, but it was just in the curriculum committee section. It was the last sentence. I have it in my mind. And we did allocate up to 10 hours. We don't know if we need to have 10 hours. We're not budgeting for 10 hours, but we are planning.
It says 10 days.
10 days, my apologies. 10 days. We don't think we're going to need 10 days. We're just agreeing that
You're agreeing
committing
that you will
to
get together for 10 days? And
up to.
that people will be compensated for those 10 days or something along those lines?
So
Okay.
I think it just opens the door. So one of the things that we found is that our teachers are already taxed during the year, and having an opportunity for them to meet collaboratively. We used to have CATS, curriculum action teams, where they would typically do that, but the feedback that we received over the last few years have been after the dismissal time, they really didn't have enough time per travel to be able to do that work. So it's just an added space that if additional curriculum writing needs to occur to fill any gaps that the summer hours or the summer days are there, doesn't necessarily mean that all 10 will be utilized.
Are we going to be asking financial questions at this time or later?
In regards to the CBA, feel free to ask them now. We're prepared to answer those.
Well, I went back and compared the scenario 5B, which was close to, in terms of, the closest we came in terms of the absolute number of raise. So that was a 5% plus 2.5% plus 2.5% over 3 years. The rest of the assumptions are the same as in the CBA contract. This also included the COPS TAN. It says in 5B that it doesn't include it, but then you can see the numbers in the actual document. And in this case, when I compare 5B, which is a total of 10%, versus the CBA document, which is a total of 17%, the total impact of that approximately 7% increase is $255,000, and that just does not make sense. It should be in the millions in terms of if we're going to be offering basically 8% more salary than we were shown in December in scenario 5B. The numbers just don't add up.
I can answer the first part. So I think the first part, when we initially went in and when we talked about parameters for increases to get teachers to the third quartile, which is competitive around the districts that we actually compared, the original conversation was 11%, and the question when discussed with the board was, could we do 11%? And the answer was yes. But when we ran the numbers to see how it moved our teachers across the channels, we found that 11% in 1 year was not going to move the needle, and that's when the conversation ensued with the board in regards to a 2-year contract, which also helps us from the standpoint in the long run as it relates to the compounded increases versus paying 11% in the first year plus a 2.75% increase, and then the association coming back a second year asking for yet another large increase, which would also be compounded and more expensive. So we were looking at the longevity of what those increases look like. But that information was also shared. I'll have Mr. Hoser to discuss the questions about the varying scenarios that were presented, but I do know that there were many.
Well, I understand that we talked about 10%. The union came back with 11%, but we're now talking about a 8% and a 9% or 6%, depending on what type of education you have. And the budget numbers for those extra values, it doesn't reflect the increase in the offer to the teachers. So we do not know what it's going to cost as far as I can tell. And so if we don't know how much it's going to cost, I don't see how we're going to vote on this. It has to, we can't bankrupt the district when we're offering these things to teachers. It doesn't make any sense.
Chris, can you look at the budget impact? So the presentation shows the salary impact across 1 year to year 2 and also includes the retirement. And I do want to kind of continue to reiterate, the board initially was okay in the conversation with a 1 year 11% raise, but again, the approach was twofold. The goal was to make them competitive. So when we ran the scenarios, the increase for the funds, so the assumption is that we would have done 11%, and I assure you the NEA would have come back and asked for potentially a or more percent, because we still would have had to be able to show the competitive movement. But Chris, if you could,
put up page 7 of the,
and Chris, show the
CBA?
budget impact as well, which is included inside the CBA document to show what the cost is across.
You could, that'd be great. I don't have
You
that.
want me to put up page 7, did you say? From the CBA? Oh, hold on.
Well, it sounds to me like that to bring us up to the 25th percentile, we needed to spend, or not spend, but we needed to raise salaries more. But previously, it was sufficient to raise them by 10% to get us to 25%, but now it requires around 17% over 2 years.
So the problem is, if we start with 10%, every year becomes exponentially is probably not the right term, but I'll use it anyway, more expensive, because whatever percentage we increase is on top of that.
It's a percentage on top of a percentage.
Exactly, right. So,
yeah, no,
the numbers just didn't make
9 and
sense.
8% or 8 and 9%, effectively it's around 18%.
Indeed,
Total.
over 2 years. So if you do that all in 1 year, that does take us down pretty low and leaves us no room in the following year to increase further. And 11%, even in that first year, does not get us even close to being competitive. So we continue to run scenario after scenario to come up with a combination of percent increases over 2 years that got our teachers to at least competitive, median or above, and we were shooting for that third quartile. And it happens mostly in most of the channels of the scheduled bachelor's through PhD, but it doesn't happen in all of them.
Yeah.
So between...
I'm not disputing the need for the increase
Sure.
in the percentage. I'm disputing whether or not we can pay for it.
I think as part of the disconnect.
What page?
I bet
the slideshow.
Thank you.
When we were looking at the first
Sorry to
scenarios,
make you
had
busy.
you, because when the meeting I sat in on, you guys clearly had developed some sort of formula for how other districts would raise their salaries. So I'm wondering if part of the disconnect is the scenarios we were looking at weren't really factoring in the idea of, like, perhaps we thought it would get us to the top quarter, but perhaps weren't when you went back and looked at that? Because I think there was some, like, 3% factor you used.
So what we looked at, why Chris pulls that up, so are a couple things. So each channel is actually built differently. So for example, the 11% actually quickly moved the bachelor's channel into the third quartile, but we saw that when you got to the other side of the channels, it didn't move as quickly. So in order to do a both and, we started to look at over 2 years as we think about the 3-year span for the charge that was given, like how do we get there to ensure that we can remain? And then we included the 3% add-on because the conversations with my colleagues were more so rooted in they are not given sizable increases anymore. So considerably, they're doing a step, which usually is 2.75% to 3%. So we added that on so that as we continue to have increases, we can see the movement for that.
Which took us to sort of a different set of numbers needed to get to that top spot, to remain over time in that.
When I think it's just a different, I think we felt more comfortable with the 2-year agreement because the first year agreement would have been 11% plus the 2.75%, and then we would have been coming back for the second time. And when we ran the first 11% scenario, it didn't move us. And so that's why we ended up going with the 2-year the way that we did versus 11 in the first, because we lost ground over multiple years. Chris, can you talk through that, please?
Sure. We did apply that 3% growth factor to the 12 other districts that we're comparing ourselves to. So for illustrative purposes here, we're guessing that 3% based on information we've gathered anecdotally, right? No one's given us in writing that, but that's what we're making the assumption, because while we were developing a new salary schedule, other districts were moving forward and we were not adding to ours. So once we developed, then it was all full ahead, and we were trying to figure out how we would gain back our competitive ground in the region. So the top schedule you're looking at here is representing fiscal years 25, 6, 7, and 8. Of course, we're in now 25. So you can see where we're at on both the bachelor's minimum and the bachelor's maximum, which is the starting point and ending point for that particular channel. So you can see this year we are on the starting, so the attraction of new teachers, we're 12 of 13. There's only one other district of the 12 that we range ourselves against that are lower than us. And then you can see after applying that 8% to the first year, which would be fiscal '26, that brings us up slightly, brings us up 4 positions there. And then if we apply that 3% factor again for yet another year for our competitive districts in '27, applying that 9% to the masters and beyond, and that 6% to the bachelors, you can see that we're now right at that 25th percentile. We're right near it anyway, very close. And looking at these numbers, 4 of 13 for '26 and '27, that to me speaks to competitiveness. And then, of course, I just projected out a 3% or a 2.75% increase to us, which would hold our ground for one more fiscal year, but we can't ever guarantee what districts around us are going to do. And then we see here that on the master's channel, we might have to look at in subsequent years. Right now is not the time, but you can see after the first year, we're somewhere, we've moved, but not very much. That second year does definitely move us, and then again, we hold for '27, '28. Master's 30 is very much the same situation. It does move the needle. '26, '27 gets us to median or just above, and then the PhD channel by the second year of the agreement gets us right around that third quartile again. So,
And that's factoring, there's a differential between like a 6 and a 9, is that?
correct.
That's factoring in
Yes,
there?
all these
Okay,
are all these are
okay,
baked into that.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure I'm not experiencing lost time here, but I really feel like we've discussed all of these things.
We've done like
before.
20 scenarios at this point, I
And,
think.
I mean, none of this is new information. We've
Correct.
always said that 25% is aspirational. We may get there, we may not. We've also discussed the percentages that we would think would be doable over a 2-year period. I don't understand whether this.
So I think the difference is, we never did one that had such high increases in the first 2 years. The highest I think we did was like a 5, a 5, a 5, or like a 7. So we never saw this particular set of numbers. And so, because what I noticed from when we looked at all those scenarios to this, is it moves up the time which we'll have to go out for another levy.
Well, that, and then also, for me, I'm a little nervous too with, making an agreement like this without knowing that the levy would pass to begin with, the initial levy that we're going out for. It's a big commitment to not have that security, financially.
So I do want to reiterate that we did have conversations about the 11% increase, which would have been the 1 year. So even if we would have come back to negotiate the second year and the association says we want 5% plus a step, that still would have been 15%. And so we did have a conversation about the 11%, and that was the ask that I had, and the charge that I was given was to ensure that we were in the third quartile, which is what this is, and looking at the budget impact, and this information was also included as well. I think I passed out some varying scenarios. So I think
we verbally discussed it. I will say, I'm not disagreeing that was the ask. I think the difference is we never saw the actual scenario on paper. And so when I noticed, and I'm not saying I disagree with it, it's just that I think for this board has to decide if you agree to this. The community has to know, and if they don't pass the levy this year, next year we're going to have to go out and it's going to be a tax increase. It sounds like. And then even if we do pass the levy, it looks like in 2 years we have to go out and ask for a tax increase. And so I guess that I think is a question for this board. Is that what you would like to do? I mean, our teachers need raises. I'm not opposed to giving them there, but that's what we're left with then. So.
Well, and that has always been my understanding when we've discussed the bond and the levy. I know Brian and I had the back and forth a few meetings ago about, are we trying to solve for the next 8 years, or are we trying to solve for the next 2 years, which I think is as far as we can reasonably see in front of us, given this current, political environment and a number of attacks from both our state and our federal representation on support for public education. And so I am not at all, we can afford this for the next 2 years, and that is really all that we can see at this moment. And yes, I think that should be clearly communicated to our community and to our teachers. And, again, as we spoke about at the forum with, community members just a few weeks ago, it is not unheard of for this district to do a salary freeze. It is not comfortable. It is not something I want to do, but it is something that we have had to do in the past when we were waiting on the community to give us permission to pay our teachers more. And so I think these are, yes, I don't think we can solve for 3 years from now's problems, but we should be clear-eyed that they are coming. And, we can continue to sit on money for a rainy day, or we can, invest now in what we know that we deserve and that our kids deserve and that our teachers deserve, and continue to fight for what we know they need.
And I will acknowledge that the 50 cents in the transfer that we're proposing, that it's a once-in-a-generation or multi-generation opportunity that we have to move forward in that direction. And I do agree that it should be clearly communicated that the purpose of that transfer is to right-size our teacher salaries. Because I will say, from my personal and professional opinion, that if we continue to languish in our position in the county, we will not retain, nor will we attract talent.
No one disagrees with you.
Yes. So this is an absolute necessity. I think that the numbers that we've put together get us there. It will hurt whether we pass that levy or not. And I do agree that we will likely need to go back out in 2 years, but I also have been communicating that to leadership, and and in our NEA negotiations, the 11% took us down to a point to where I don't feel like we were comfortable moving into that second year, because we don't want to freeze. As Ms. Kaufman stated, we've frozen before, and it is extraordinarily expensive to buy our way out of a freeze, because not only do we have to continue moving up the schedule, we have to increase the schedule to a degree that is not affordable nor sustainable.
So I don't understand how, if we go to 11% in 1 year and you're worried, how is it possible that we go to 17% in 2 years and you're not worried?
Because 11% doesn't get us competitive, Trent.
No.
And we would have to continue to add a percent.
But that's not what the worry is about. The worry is about how much money do we have coming in revenue?
Because if we do 11% in that first year, which is what the NEA requested, we presented as a bargaining team a multi-year agreement that was less than 11% in that first year, but more in the aggregate, because 11%, if it does not get to the board's request to get to the third quartile, we would have to add another large percentage in year 2, which we absolutely could not afford.
So I think part of the issue, I think when we were originally looking at numbers, we clearly did not know what the union would ask for, and the number was higher than, we, I think, had really kind of done a scenario for. And I think it was showing us kind of getting through 3 years or so, without the levy, or, so I think it had us a little further out. I recognize it's further in, and we're still faced with the same issue, which is really, the community needs to decide, what their teachers are worth to them. Will they pay for it or will they not? I just wanted to point out that doing this does move that timeline forward closer. And then I have concerns about if we can't pass a no tax increase, we're sure as heck probably not going to pass a tax increase, but we'll see. But Katie, to your point, I appreciate you saying, because my question then was, if we do this and we don't get it, then what does happen?
Yeah.
So the steps would be, we would freeze any salary.
I mean, I think that is, we have to go into crisis mode then, and I think, obviously, again, recognition that ultimately we control the budget, so, deciding where we would want to make cuts and freezes, and, I mean, there's all kinds of drastic cost-cutting measures that I don't even want to say out loud because I don't want to think about them right now. But, yeah, so.
And to your point, you've all discussed this with the NEA, so the teachers are aware that as a result, that could happen. I guess that's the other point, that we could end up in a situation where we would have to do that.
I mean, as the projections as we've been presented, we can afford to do that.
Yeah.
It is a very tight budget if the 50-cent levy does not pass. And we absolutely will, in a few years, be back out in community talking about the need for increased investment, in large part due to decreased investment from a variety of other governmental sources that are outside of our immediate control. So again, just want to continue to point out that, I think we have a lot of agreement here, and we have a lot of external forces that we could be uniting to address as well.
I'd like to just make a couple comments on this. So one, first of all, I'm supportive of the CBA, period. Second, I agree with what Katie has been saying here. I feel like, I also said this back in December and in November, that this does not solve the problem for us. It's, we're merely doing what we can now for the 2 years that, as you said, we can foresee, and I agree with that. I have a different question, and I think it might be underlying some of the other questions, is we were sent, and this is not in the public documents, but it was sent to us on email today, that the salary projections for 2027, if you wouldn't mind, Chris, maybe pulling that up or something, but you have 19,691,434, and that's an increase of 2.875 million from the current budget for this year, based of 16,815,000. But according to the presentation from Dr. Ambers Phillips, that number should be more than 3.09 million. So we're not, something is not, I'm wondering if you could explain what looks like a discrepancy in the numbers we're being given.
I don't feel there is a discrepancy, but I do know that the numbers that we've generated have been poured over and over. And
so the report today said the salary numbers is 19 projected in 2027 with the CBA.
Trent, that's not just teachers. That's
that's everybody.
Okay.
I understand. Yes, so 19,691. And then the total salaries for 2025 budgeted this year is 16,815. Now the presentation we were shown said just salary increases for teachers on the CBA in that same 2-year time period would go up 3.09 million.
Yeah, he's right.
But the total, including teachers and all other employees, the data we were sent today shows only 2.875 million. So something is off by $500,000 or more, 700,000 maybe? I mean, we're off by a good bit in the data we've been provided.
The total expenditures.
I'm just confused.
The total expenditures, not just salary, for scenario 5B is 32,222,000. Okay, the total expenditures, and that's in 2028. Okay, that's when all 5% plus 2.5 plus 2.5 are added in. For in the CBA document, if we do the first year, second year, it's only 2 years, and we look at the total expenditures, it's $32,197,000. There's a difference of approximately $25,000 in difference, but yet the difference here is 10% versus 18%. There is no way that these numbers are correct.
I wholeheartedly disagree. You have the benefit of looking at multiple scenarios and trying to compare one to the other. I'm looking at what I have presented today. I'm happy to go back and...
This is what was sent today with the CBA numbers in place. I'm just looking at that document.
Can I ask that we...
We don't know what this costs yet. We just don't know.
So I guess I'm wondering, is the numbers we were sent today from Chris, is that the correct number, or is it the 3.09 million that was in the presentation? That's my question.
What I can tell you is that the cost to increase in year one, only teachers, is 1 million, just a little north of 1 million. In year two, it's 1.2 million. In year three, it's 631,000. And then we add our benefits on top of that.
Yeah, but that's not what the numbers are.
There are other, I was trying to interject.
More built into these than, and when we pull things apart, things do
we
start
need to
to not
know
make
what's built
sense.
in.
Well, Trent, let Dr. Jameson can answer it, 'cause it's
So when we present the budget, we also have to consider other individuals, which includes central office staff, support staff. So that's why you may see a discrepancy. So the information that's actually included in what you see here is only representing for the CBA for teachers. And some of them, when we did, just to kind of give some additional context, which I think we included some of it in some of the responses. So thank you for submitting the questions in advance. Some of those numbers are moving targets. So, for example, Dr. Ambrose Phillips talked about the dissolution of the sick leave bank. We actually showed the total cost for the number of individuals that are still included, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that financial impact will hit the budget for next year. We have staff who probably could save those days and maybe use them when they retire. So some of them are our best guesses. The same would be said for the number of days that are actually included for people who actually may or may not have kids. And so his budget scenarios that he's presenting is not just for the teachers. For this particular presentation, we were just talking about what the increases were for teachers year
right.
one
So
and year two.
I completely understand what you're saying. I agree with you. The issue is then the total for all staff would be higher than the 3.09 million.
We could talk about that later because you're making assumptions that we haven't shared with that I would love to discuss in closed session.
No, but it is one of the assumptions. So just to clarify, the assumptions include an admin salary increase of 3.75, a 3.75 increase to base support staff salary. So that's why the number on this page we got today is higher.
Correct.
Is because we are including raises for other non-certified and people not covered by the
Correct.
collective bargaining.
And increases to
Correct.
support.
No, but it's lower than that number. It's not higher. It's lower. That's the problem.
Number's lower on here.
In 2027, just salaries, the number is 19.69 million. So if, based upon Dr. Ambrose Phillips' presentation, that number should be at least, and certainly a lot more than, 3.09 million higher than the 2025 number, which is 16.8 million. But right now, it's only 2.87 million higher, so the number's lower. It could just be that Chris's number is right and the Dr. Ambrose Phillips presentation number is incorrect, or Dr. Ambrose Phillips presentation is correct and Chris's number is right. I was just trying to find out what's the right number.
I wouldn't say that any of them are incorrect. I think it's just the way that we've sliced all these and pieced them back together. So,
then we would expect.
I mean, I'd be happy to dig through and find, parse all of this back out before we recombine it to show you what's happening. I don't know that right now is the time that we're able to do that.
I'm happy to wait on further development. Thank you very much. But I just want to reiterate, I am supportive of the CBA, period, for the reasons like Katie mentioned. But I do think that the board needs some good numbers, and I just don't know which are, at the moment, I don't know which ones are the right numbers. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Using our calculators for math, sorry.
Do y'all want to adjourn for a minute while you work this out, or can we move on?
No, we're fine.
Do y'all need to? Do y'all want to?
Well, I guess my question is, do people want, it's slated to be voted on tonight. I think there's a lot of confusion about what the numbers are. I don't really want to hold this process up, but I also think it'd be nice to have.
Why don't we take like 20 minutes? Is that enough time to get whatever needs sorted out, 30 minutes?
Could we move through some of the other agenda items?
I think
And if
that's
necessary,
appropriate.
Yeah,
pause
so
right
people can
before
leave.
the vote?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's going to be support for the CBA. I don't.
Right, no,
I would like to
I
see,
don't-
like, make sure the numbers
And I'm-
match.
And for my own purpose, I'm okay waiting even another day. I mean, I don't necessarily need
Voting
it tonight.
goes. Yeah.
All right, so I think we're gonna move on. So now we have the admin communications, building goals. All right, we're moving on now. Quiet, all right. We're going to building goals updates by building principals.
Thank you for considering moving that to the end. I was like, we're next. Tanisha Stansel, principal of the ECC. I feel like I've almost seen y'all almost every month this year, but here to bring a little joy. That's one of the things we do at the ECC. We have a lot of moments of joy.
Want me to pull this up for you?
Please.
Okay.
And as I get started, I always want to welcome and give a shout out to our students and staff and parents that are in the room of the ECC, as well as that are watching online.
Is this correct?
That is correct, yes. Had to put all this greatness in 5 slides, but you know, we do what we can. All right, so I'm just gonna do a quick review for our building goals. We are making progress in our goals for achievement, for intervention, for communication, and for our project work. So we'll kind of go through that, and I'll try to intertwine some of the things that we're doing. So as we get started with literacy, our building goals for the August to December were small group engagement, or just engagement in general, building authentic relationships with students, and really just working on our routines and procedures to make sure students know what to do and what does it mean to be at the ECC. And so we'll go into the literacy, the next slide. And so I just took the opportunity to combine. I know that we always want to know that we're moving all students regardless of their background. And so I decided that this would be the best graph to show. And I'm pretty excited about it. We definitely still have some work to do in reading, but I would like to say across, for all of these graphs that we saw, our students and teachers across the board had high achievement. So we didn't have anybody have low achievement and low growth. The growth kind of depends on the classroom, but everybody in the building, 100% of our teachers had high achievement. So I definitely want to celebrate that. It gives, just a testament to their hard work and really following our goals as a school. And as you look at those graphs for early lit, then that kind of moves us into literacy. So we kind of, for preschool, we've kind of been talking about, how can we strengthen our preschool to make sure students are kindergarten ready? And I just wanted to take this time to highlight in looking at just the literacy aspects that our preschool teachers are keeping data on, that we already have so many students in our preschool that are at least knowing 50% of their letters and at least 5 out of the 10 sounds that the teachers identified. And so I would like to say, they are doing an amazing job at keeping this data because a lot of our students are already exceeding to know 100%. So we are going to keep that trajectory. We have our second grade data, and it's for our ELA reading and our math. We are also making progress towards these goals. As we shift into this semester where we currently are, we are really focusing on small group engagement and what does that look like. So we will be partnering with Link STL, who will come in and has already started, made an introduction to our teachers of just what are the resources they're going to provide to us and how can we fill our toolbox with strategies to make sure that we are providing differentiation for all students. And just to speak on our scores specifically for math, our math is tremendous. Growth in math is tremendous for our second grade students. So I just wanted to shout that out because we were piloting new resources, but to see those percentage jumps were pretty amazing. And I was really excited with the team because this would not be done without our teachers. Our attendance has struggled. The ECC has been full of everything you can think of. every sickness. Our siblings share it with their parents back and forth. We had lice for a couple of months, but I would like to say that we have seen some growth from our attendance efforts. If you had to ask me what are the main two things that bring our attendance down, it has been illness or family planning. We just have some families that are in some situations, and they need to live life, and they're just working with us. But I want to give a shout out that our families are following our attendance protocols. They're telling us when their students are not going to be there. They're using all the ways to let us know where their child is every single day. So even though our numbers fluctuate, like right now for January, where we ended in December at 84.46, in January we ended at 84.75. So even though it's not full percentages, it really gives a pat on the back to our attendance team, holding attendance meetings with families, figuring out what the barriers are for our families, and really trying to get them to school every day. So I did want to give a celebration to our families. Anybody have any questions? I know that was a lot, but I think I have 3 minutes.
I did not say 3 minutes. I said five.
That's about 5 slides.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I think that's excellent. I want to congratulate the teachers and the staff and administration there at the ECC. Real quick, on the attendance numbers, is that K through K and above, or is that, what is it, you go to second grade, right? So
This is just K through 2.
K through 2, okay.
We do track attendance for our preschoolers that access us via federal programs.
And where's that percentage roughly, do you think?
I'd probably have to do the average, but I have the percentage for each child. We keep them individually because it only encompasses a group of students. But I can send you that information if you'd like that.
No, that's fine. Is it roughly the same as the K through 2, or is it?
They're in the 90% and 80% when we look at our 90-90.
Okay.
So they aren't super low because those programs do require them to come to school just as we require our K through 2 students to come to school. All right, thank you.
And you have an event coming up next week, right? An event at the ECC?
Yes, we have select second graders that are doing the Black History Living Museum next week. So I put it in our newsletter, so please feel free to stop by. It's from 4:30 to 6 next Thursday. And it's just a select group, but they are really excited to talk about their person that they learned about. They're ready to dress up and show about their lives, and I hope everyone can come out and support them in that.
It was a fun first experience with that last year, and
yes,
so I wanted to make
this is
sure
our second
folks
time.
know
It's
that.
kind of like a second grade first rite of passage.
Nice.
Thank you all.
That's hard to follow.
Right. As we stack the deck.
All right, hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, Board of Education, Dr. Jamieson, all my fellow MRH staff members, and all of our community members. My name is Carlisha Elam, and I am the proud principal of MRH Elementary School. We're still bringing the joy. I'm very proud of all the data that we have to present today. Our teachers and students have been working really hard, and our parents have been partnering with us very well, and it really has shown in our data for this school year. When I speak on our data, we will be talking about 3 areas: academics, attendance, and culture. And academics is always at the forefront of everything we do, and we know that with attendance, we need students in seats in order for them to learn and be successful. And culture was something that was brought up based off of the data that we had from our surveys that we received from the wonderful Vince Estrada. And we found that last year that was something that was very important for us, and we tried to pinpoint the key areas that had the highest need. So today, for the 2024-2025 school year, in the area we are measuring for academics, reading and math. For reading, we wanted to move from a baseline from fall from 70% proficient and advanced to 77%, and we are on target. On the slide, you will see that school-wide, we're at 74.5. Our next benchmark, when we take it, will be in May, and so our teachers are working hard. Now that we have had all of the snow days, we should be well rested and ready to increase these scores by May. In the area of math, we wanted to move from 55% to 67%, and we are on target for that at 59.9%. And in the area for attendance, we want to be at 90% or better, and right now we were at 87.73, and we have the top attendance in the district. All right, so we're battling, us in the middle school, if you can't tell. So for culture, we survey our staff every month during our staff meeting in the areas of sense of belonging, communication, as well as safety. And so for sense of belonging, we want to move to 85% or higher, and right now we're at 83%, so we're on target to moving there. For communication, we want to move from 75 to 79%. Well, we're at 79%, so we have already met that, and so we hope to sustain it. And then in the area of safety, we have 88%, and we have met that already. And it should go even higher because of the hard work of the wonderful Dr. Dietrich, who has put a cell phone tower at our school, and our phones work now. So if you do come to our school, your phone will actually work, and you don't have to be on Wi-Fi. But when we go into our STAR data, you'll see the green will show those that are proficient advanced, the red will show the students that are below grade level, so basic or below basic, and we have had increases across all grade levels from fall to winter. We also saw increase in all ethnic groups in the area of math. One thing that we will highlight is our 3rd and 4th grade teams used illustrative, and they actually saw more growth as far as decreasing the number of students in below basic and moving them into basic, proficient, or advanced. And so we hope to continue to move that, and we thank you all for helping us with Beast Academy for those students who are already achieving greatly in the area of mathematics, and they're utilizing that tool to continue to push them to accelerate even further. If you go to the next slide, you'll see some of the strengths. Our students with IEPs in 3rd and 4th grade reading. The increase has been phenomenal, from 43% to 57%. We departmentalize in with our special education department, so we have teachers who teach math and reading, and they're in 3rd and 4th, and then the same for 5th and 6th. And we have found that to be helpful for them with collaboration with others. We also have had a focus on SMART goals. Each team creates a team SMART goal, not just for their class, and they work together as a team to come up with ways to continue to increase that data. Some areas of opportunity are to continue to monitor the instruction using academic monitoring, as well as consistent growth in math across all grade levels. And our hope is that now that we have a consistent framework, that we will see that growth across all grade levels. For attendance, we continue to have our monthly attendance meetings. We have classroom-based incentives where we have traveling trophies, and the class of the month gets a popcorn and movie as a celebration. And then within our newsletter, we continue to impart the importance of attendance. Some opportunities, we will go with illness as well. Also, with our family planning is vacations. We have families that are going on week-long cruises in the middle of the school year. And it really impacts them in ways where your child has to catch up on different things, although it is a fun activity, but really thinking about how do we properly plan and working together to see how we can decrease the absenteeism within our classes. For sense of belonging, communication, and safety, there's criteria under each one where staff members, it's not just a blanket, do you feel like you belong, but there are criteria for each area. And we found that our teams like each other. And when you like each other and you work well together, you see more camaraderie and a sense of belonging. People will write in there, it's like, I love being here. And that's what you want. When you go to work every day, this is a hard job. And so you want to be able to like the people that you work with, as well as helping the students to feel that they belong, because if you feel like you belong, you transcend that information off to your students. So We continue to take surveys. We're working to continuously work diligently with our safety, and we'll continue to deploy our PLCs in collaboration and planning and looking at student work. We'll continue to implement our attendance task force, and we'll also make sure that we provide opportunities for our staff to continue to give us feedback. That is all that I have for you on this evening. Are there any questions that you have for me?
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I don't understand, so the percentage increases, you took a test at sort of the beginning of the year and then recently sometime.
December.
And you see an increase over that. It's not a year-over-year increase, it's a within this school year.
Correct. We
Okay.
have benchmark testing 3 times a year. And so previously we used to take it in January, but you have that 2-week break. And so we found it important for us to take it before the break and then get in the swing of things. And then we're taking it after the MAP test this year, which is different than what we usually do. But that's because the window has moved up for us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Wade Zitzer. I'm working on it.
I'm Michael Zitzer, the principal at the middle school, and far less gregarious than the last 2 principals. But that's what I think makes our team work really well. We're all very different, but I kind of bring our skills and stuff together. So
You can do the next one.
perfect. Ooh, I was struggling with stalling there. What the second slide is the one I'd like to spend a little bit of time on. I know this data is a little stale, but I'd be hard pressed to not talk about just like the real dedication of our staff last year. Being a first-year principal is hard, but when you have a really great staff and a wonderful set of students and families, it makes it a lot easier. And our district performed off the charts with our APR this year, 97%. And I know, so looking at 78.8 doesn't seem as great, but that's almost double what we did in the previous year in 1 year. And that takes a lot of dedication from a lot of people and a lot of willingness to do a couple things differently than they did before. And a lot of people being willing to say they don't have the answers and really just working really hard. And so there's some places I really want to highlight in terms of just like our ELA growth was tremendous. To get every single point there is incredible. Math has been a struggle for the middle school, and we saw some growth. We're not where we want to be, but to see growth there is really important, especially with 2 brand new teachers. Not brand new to the teaching profession, but to our school. And then the other really big one for me was attendance. We earned 3 points, which is, I think, more than we've earned in the last 4 or 5 years, and a 5% jump from where we were the year before. And so that was a lot of dedication and time from Dr. Maxwell and Ms. Brown and Ms. Warren and myself to make sure we got kids to come to school. And so I really want to, I know it's old, but it's a huge deal to us at the middle school that we were able to do that, and now we're trying to build off that momentum. And so our goals this year were to see a 10% increase in both math and ELA proficiency from last year's overall MAP scores. And so this year, we're seeing a bit of a stagnation there, but we use one metric, NWEA, which is an adaptive test for kids. And so how far they can progress on that is a little different than a content-specific grade level test like the MAP. And so what we've really chosen to focus on is on how many students are reaching their growth target. And so you can see that right now we're having about 50 to 55% of students reaching their growth target, and then even higher number of students are actually demonstrating growth. So NW creates this growth target, and so we use it as a metric, but it's a difficult formula for us to figure out. So what we really focus on are kids moving, and so what we've seen across grade levels and across content is a significant percentage of students are moving, and that's all students. So we're seeing a slight closing a gap between our students who would be identified in a subgroup and then their white counterparts and closing across there, or the students with IEPs and students who do not qualify for those. And so then for attendance, until this past month, we were number 1 in attendance all year long. It was five months continuous champs, but we have now been replaced temporarily. But the attendance team at our school works really, really hard, and we meet monthly. We love a predictive proportional attendance chart from Ms. Ward. And we identified students at the beginning of the year who didn't meet attendance last year because we determined that some of the practice we were doing was just checking week over week what was happening with individual kids. And the reality is students who aren't coming to school frequently have that pattern over years. And so instead of waiting for stuff to come in or waiting for a kid to miss 5 days before we start, we just identify the students who struggled to make attendance last year and who slightly made it, and we immediately started with interventions on day 1. And so we've been talking to families and meeting with families, individual incentives for students, to the point now that some of them want to stay on incentive, but we have to convince them that coming to school is more important than getting a candy bar from me. I'll just give you the candy bar. Please keep coming to school. But we've seen a big jump, and I'm still hoping, despite all the illness that's gone around, that we can still get to 90%. So we're sitting at 87.3, which again is still an increase from last year. Now, places where we are on target. We set a goal this year to start our really focusing on PLCs. It's been difficult at the middle school because every single teacher, other than our 2 PE teachers, teaches something different. No one teaches the exact same thing at the exact same time. And so we've had teams on 2 grade level teams, the 7th grade team and the 8th grade team, working on a collective PLC goal around writing with students, and we've seen tremendous progress. We've actually met our goal for both those writing assignments. Now we're moving on to other things. So being able to get our staff to get on a collective kind of goal and objective, work with students across content areas, interdisciplinary, come back, look at data, and address that, has really been the ability to kind of get the PLC process really moving in our schools so that next year when we change our schedule, we can move into departmentalized versions of that and get more focused in on grade level specific content. But now our teachers have those tools and have seen success that way. So kind of laying the groundwork for being able to make that shift next year. But we are on target with where we tried to be, which is moving into that developing range. And then lastly, we looked at our culture data from last year, and we saw 2 key areas that were kind of lower scoring. And it's my school sets clear rules for behavior, and the behaviors in my class allow teachers to teach. And one of the things that we noticed and came through BLT and talking to staff is that our students have 9 classes. They go to 4 on each day, plus they have advisory. If 9 classes have different cultures, I'm now responsible for learning 9 different content areas and 9 different sets of expectations. That's really hard for a kid of any age, but certainly hard for a 12 to 14-year-old. And so this summer we spent time thinking about what are the things our kids need to be able to do best, what kind of clear expectations do we want and characteristics do we want from students. And we found that there were 6 really key things that really helped us on our week-long expeditions, and that our year should be built around. If this is what we want students to be like on those and to be able to fully experience Jekyll Island on their own without adult support, then they need to be working on these 6 things over the 2 years at the middle school. So I'm really proud of is that our teachers have really focused on that and bought into that, and that takes a lot to give some of that autonomy up to say this is for the bigger purpose of our school. And we're now scoring at 3.27 on the clear set, so the students know we have rules and expectations for their behaviors and things we want to see from them. And we have a slight uptick in how students are saying that we're responding to behaviors as well. So the rest of these slides we can go through quickly. They're just representation of the data, so you know that I didn't make it up. And you can go to the next one also. If you look at the attendance one again, we were beating everybody, but January was rough, so we're going to get right back up there. But we are ahead of everywhere we were last year for attendance. And then that's just a breakdown of the data I just explained. So our action steps, just so you know that, unlike the elementary and the ECC, we have still some room to grow right now on our goals. And so we've implemented a program using an outside intervention program for a select group of students who we identified at the beginning of the year. The reason I came up with 10% was because I looked at the data and said, there's 12 kids right here who we can move. And so we're working with those kids even more, providing them with additional instructional time with our content teachers during advisory. We're gradually shifting the responsibility. One area that we're lagging on that developing thing is I've been, and it's my own fault, running a lot of it, and we need to start moving that off of me and on to the teachers to run because they're more than capable of doing that on their own. And then meeting with our students to kind of continue to reinforce behaviors, but really start to understand what they mean by the behaviors are affecting, because our referrals don't reflect that. We average less than half a referral per student, and so what we're getting in terms of actual discipline data and what they're saying is happening in class don't align. And so setting up meetings to meet with our PAL board, and then also just different students to just kind of get their understanding of that. And then the last big thing is, I've discussed this with you all already, but we don't have enough instructional time in our core content areas at the middle school. There's like a 6,000 minute difference between how much time they spend in math and reading at the elementary and what they do when they come to us. And so we already have plans to change our schedule next year to be more of kind of an intermediary between elementary and the high school. And so that plan is to increase instructional minutes in core content areas and provide students with less classes so they can focus more on those. And so while that doesn't fix anything for now, we know we've been gathering data for 2 years to figure out how do we make large-scale systemic changes, not just things happening month to month or week to week. because we're trying to, approach this from all levels. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You said you're going to do high school? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Nicole Huffman, proud principal at the high school. I'm kind of, I guess, a mix between the middle of all of that, right? So I kind of come in a little bit more chill, but not as chill as Mike, but, not as outgoing as some of the others. But I'm excited to share kind of where we are right now as we look at moving forward and kind of toward the end of the school year. Broke up our goals into academic and culture and climate. So the first three are more the academic realm. So looking at growing our students on NWEA. Our second one is looking at the percent of students scoring advanced and proficient on our end of course exams. And then finally, increasing our grad rate from a 97.2 to 100%. So if we go back up to the top, really focusing in on that growth, you can see the percentages there by each of our tested areas, the percent of students that actually met their growth target already for winter. And the interesting component there is that while looking at the data, language, and reading kind of remained stagnant with the percent on benchmark, the interesting component was that we were moving out of the lower categories. So we're moving our kids up, but not necessarily up to the green yet, which is great because that's what helped us achieve our APR and be one of the top performing high schools in the area. So we are moving those kids that are lower achieving in reading and language. But that brings us back to what are we doing for our students who are higher achieving, right? So we've got to put some action steps in place for that. Looking at Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. So our math is doing the same thing, but look at that Algebra 2 and that Geometry. Woo-hoo, Bethany, she's over there. One of our Algebra 2 teachers is sitting right here. But already 69% have met their growth goal for the year, and 84% in Geometry have met their growth goal for the year. So outstanding. So absolutely we are on track. By the end of the school year for our next one, our end of course, we don't really have any data yet. There's not a benchmarking system yet that aligns directly to the end of course exams for the state of Missouri. It'd be something that we would need to build out, and our teachers do a phenomenal job of putting that formative assessment in place along the way to be able to measure that to the actual state standards. And we are going to be looking at giving some of the release tested items, testing out the testing platform so our students have experience with that as they get ready to take that test. And finally, our last academic goal was around graduation, which we know that's a huge indicator of success. So currently right now we have 94% of our seniors on track to reach without additional support. We've got some students that are receiving some support to get that credit and to just have somebody with them say, did you turn this in yet? Did you get this done? So to keep them on track. The interesting piece through all of this data was that our highest percent of students that were not on track, if we're thinking about big picture, so within our student success teams, we look at cohorts and trying to keep all of our cohort together. Our freshmen had the least percent of students on track and ready, so they had the highest rate of needing to repeat a course. So that was an interesting component as we look at that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in our action steps. So we'll kind of look at some of our culture and climate. So looking at our proportional attendance, not necessarily on track yet. I'll say progressing. So from a 79.2 to an 85. I do want to celebrate, though, a lot of the hard work that we put in last year to actually earn 2 points in our APR the previous year. While we are at an 80% predictive attendance rate right now in January, that is higher than we were last year. And one of the interesting factors that we've noticed is that when we put incentives in place, that like you have to have 90% attendance rate to come to homecoming, we saw the highest attendance we've ever seen. So that was very interesting for us. We saw an 85% in the month of September for 90%. Another interesting layer that our data has started to reveal when we look at attendance, our highest attendance rate comes from our freshman class, and it increases that way. So they might be struggling with this transition, but they're coming to school, and there's a consistency there. But what it has also revealed is that by the time they hit senior year, I have 58% of my seniors at 90% or better. So that's an area that we really need to uncover and dig into and work with. No judgment, Maya, it's okay. And then finally, by the end of the school year, our other culture and climate goal is based on our survey data, looking at student recognition and celebration. Those were our lowest areas, along with parent involvement, engagement, and then communication. And I'm going to kind of share a little bit of some interesting stuff that I kind of found out about that. But we can go on to kind of some of our action steps. So we're just going to continue our work with our PLCs and our SSTs, looking at, I think, big picture is the longitudinal data. What we found is that the language and reading actually have a longitudinal goal for students as they take that on NWEA, but math doesn't, because it is a course-specific test. So as we start to dig into this a little bit more, we can see how students are growing over time. And if they aren't, we can kind of see where we can step into that learning progression. Looking at trends and patterns, we've revamped our SSTs to really come back to what are the trends and patterns that we can control at the classroom level, instead of really focusing on things that are more of a tier 3, so being very intentional. Looking at how can we help our students and staff understand the data. What does NWEA mean? We don't, how do I even use this, and what do I do with it? We have NWEA actually coming in, so part of what our teachers shared with us was that we don't really even know what the test is asking. And when we had PD, it was several years ago, there were 60 of us in a room, we were doing it virtually, so can we get someone to come teach us a little bit more about this? And so that actually is scheduled and slated. I work with Dr. McGee and NWEA, and we have them coming in March. Looking at the EOC release items and tests, we started digging into item benchmark descriptors and item analysis to look at what areas were our students struggling with most, and looking at our transition programs. So as we think about our freshmen are coming every day, yet they are struggling to meet the minimum, what can we do different, and what might that look like? So that's got to be an area that we continue to work on. We've added a couple of different things this year, but what else could we do? And work with our teams for that. And then just continued classroom observations with feedback, continuing down that and working with teachers. There's another one. I think when we look at our culture and our climate data, part of what we talked about, I meet monthly with Bethany and Rich. We meet in the morning and we talk about things that are going great, things we need to work on. And one of the things that we've kind of come into is we feel like people might be a little bit surveyed out. So as we start to continue to take the survey after survey, so how can we utilize maybe some of our staff meeting time? So, and we were supposed to have our staff meeting last Tuesday, but we weren't here, but that's coming Monday. But we're going to have a communication lab. We're going to sit down and talk about what's going great, what do we need to fix, and really looking at what does parent involvement look like at MRH High School. There are 4 questions that really on the survey that define parent involvement. 3 of them are teacher focused and answered, and 1 of them is parent. And the one on parent is I attend my child's parent-teacher conferences. So if we're gauging it all on that, we've got to look at some other ways to gauge that. And just continuing our intervention team, our attendance meetings, our home visits, classroom level interventions, tier 2 and tier 3 interventions, like defining that out. We're really working on what does multi-tiered systems of support look like at the high school level, and really building that out, big picture. So that's where we are.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Questions? Okay.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to request that Ms. Trumper present her report now because it's a school night and we've got other stuff to do. So rather than keep her all night, if that's okay.
Good by me.
All right.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. There should be a presentation shared if you put it up. But I'll begin. Hi, everyone. My name is Maya Trumper. I'm a senior at MRH, and I'm also president of the Principal Advisory Leadership Board, hence me being here right now. So, usually the goal of these presentations are sort of to bring an ask to the board. You can stay right there for now. I'll get to that in a minute. To bring an ask to the board sort of about our school in general, our district. And the issue today, I think, has a lot to do with the safety and equality within our district. I know there was the senior night for basketball and cheer tonight. I don't know if anyone went to that. I wanted to, but I was at a previous basketball game, and I was watching the game, and I know a lot of my friends were looking at the sidelines during halftime, and one thing that everyone can notice during those basketball games is the lack of an athletic trainer. But if you go to literally any other school near St. Louis County, you will notice an athletic trainer at the sidelines of almost every single other game, at away games for our teams, or if you're just attending, a different school district's game. However, that's something that, as a school, we have not been able to achieve a permanent athletics trainer, which is our ask for today. To have the board consider hiring an athletic and activities trainer for our school district. So I'd like to start by noting that the National Institute of Health reports that about 90% of student athletes sustain some injury in their high school career. and that's affecting many of the students in MRH today. About 45% of our student body participates in some form of athletics, which means 90% of 45% of our students are actively being injured in our sports games. And despite those numbers of peoples actively being hurt in our games, we don't actually have a qualified medical trainer attending a majority of our games. So we all know, like, sports are an amazing opportunity to expand physical fitness, valuable skills, leadership skills, etc. But without proper supervision, it can be like really, really dangerous. About 70% of schools in the St. Louis region have a full-time athletic trainer, and that MRH does not. For all of spring sports, we have a trainer for 3 girls soccer games, 2 baseball games, and 1 boys volleyball game, and that's it. I don't have in front of me the number of games that we have per year, but I'm going to tell you it's a lot more than that. So I think looking to hire a full-time trainer is a necessary step in order to further, firstly, the safety of the student body, as well as the equality from MRH to other school districts across the St. Louis region. So here I have some benefits that are listed. So starting with this first example, we're talking specifically here about how students are being benefited. So obviously a huge one is safety. They're able to help with injuries, but also they allow students to have the perception of being safe, which oftentimes isn't applied right now. I love all of our coaches. Thank you, Coach Nobi. But also, at the end of the day, guys, high school teachers, not medical professionals. And having qualified trainers is absolutely critical to ensuring that students feel comfortable playing their best. Which also ties right into that sort of game day disadvantage we have outlined here. If students know that there is no one capable of sort of treating any injury they might get during a game, they're scared to play their fullest and quite frankly can't be as successful with that knowledge. So moving on to the next slide. Additionally, having a trainer would help save many of our resources. I'm looking at a different slide here. So one thing we have here is currently, if you go to like a basketball game, like I was talking about earlier, with no trainer, a lot of times nurses may be asked to step in order to provide the role of a trainer. However, they do so completely voluntarily, and most of the time are not being paid for their work, and also, again, don't have the necessary skills in order to facilitate the proper steps that need to be taken and that could be taken by a trainer. One specific note I'll make here is that of the potential insurance cost drop, because as it stands right now with a possible injury occurring, there can be serious legal repercussions without a trainer. But hiring one would minimize both the legal and financial risk that the school holds. Simply by hiring a trainer, that would help reduce that. Additionally, in most school districts where they do have a full-time trainer, they're taking care of a lot of the paperwork. So when students are filling out all the MSHA physicals and MSHA participation forms, right now we have other staff doing that, but a lot of that paperwork would be handled by the trainer and therefore decrease the burden on other members of a staff. Additionally, they could also take care of any work that ensues after an injury occurs. That would be their job. And we have a note here for our community. Right now, obviously, our track is sort of not good for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons that we can't hold a track meet and oftentimes have less home games is because that lack of safety that we see because we don't have a trainer. Okay, safety is going to be a reoccurring theme, so I'm sorry if it seems redundant, but that's because it's important. But additionally, moving on to participation, Parents are going to feel more comfortable allowing their students to participate if they know that there's someone qualified who is able to take care of their physical needs. I know a lot of students and parents are concerned about possible injuries, and it's a very valid concern, especially in games like soccer where many injuries occur, every game. If we're looking at simply having a teacher who's supposed to take care of these students, yeah, a lot of parents aren't going to be comfortable allowing their, child to join these activities, but having a trainer could increase overall student participation in athletics, which is so beneficial, as I stated earlier. Another key factor about how we interact with our community and how a trainer would benefit this is talking about our school relationships, relationships with other schools. So right now, when we go to other schools, most of the time, those schools are going to have a trainer there. When we're playing those games, our students are using their trainers anytime they get injured, right? However, when those same teams come to MRH and we don't have a trainer, it means anytime they get injured, they are left with no resources, despite us using their resources anytime we travel to their schools. So hiring a trainer would allow us to create sort of a better relationship with all the schools that we compete against. Physical safety, I told you it would start to feel redundant, but truly, these trainers can provide a lot of really important resources in a few key aspects that I have outlined here. So first of all, preventative. It's important to note that trainers aren't just doing work on game day. They would be there year-round, which means that they would be there to help provide preventative care. So this would look like ensuring that pre-season students are doing enough things like basic stuff, stretching, right? They're actively taking care of their injuries after it happens in order to prevent further injury, right? They're doing proper strength training before doing, games. And all of this would help minimize the risk of injury. Concussions are a huge one. We see a lot of risk of that specifically in basketball as well as a variety of other sports. Right now, any head injury, typically the coach can evaluate it, but if there's substantial head injury, the student can no longer participate in the game and has to go to a hospital or official doctor for a diagnosis. However, the trainer on site would be able to do a more in-depth sort of evaluation of that head injury to decide if the student is able to play in the game that isn't occurring right now. Of course, acute injury, that's going to look like a sprained ankle, etc. And post-injury, I mentioned that a little bit earlier, making sure people are taking proper care of themselves and benefiting the health of all of our students. Yeah. For our people, I think a lot of this was talked about. I think the public perception of our athletic programs is also really important. We need to be perceived as a school who does the most for student safety, which I believe is only possible through hiring an athletic trainer. Here, I'm not going to cover all of these. This is simply a list of all the responsibilities that the trainer could have upon hiring and the benefits it would have. The next two slides sort of outline some of this research, most of which that I covered at the beginning. Just for the sake of clarity, I want to emphasize that these trainers would be available during games, off days, ACT labs, even sort of between seasons to help provide support for our students. They would handle injury-related paperwork. And as for the issue of payment, I don't have a specific number for you all, but I can tell you that most districts partner with SSM or other hospitals to reduce the initial payment. SSM typically covers about half of the total cost. I believe I have a basic cost here, but it's going to change depending on the person you employ, also dependent on what hospital you could possibly partner with. So that's my pitch. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I just want to start by saying to commend you because I think this was a very thorough and well thought out presentation. You guys really covered all the angles. I'm also very excited because I, for the last couple of years, have asked various people about why we don't have a trainer. And now that I have a kid who's participating in athletics, and if you look at their basketball team, there's probably 4 kids right now in a boot or on crutches, and why my freshman child has played a lot of varsity basketball this year. So I I think it's a great idea. I think, especially if we can partner with someone, because I know there's going to be a large cost associated with it. So I'm glad you guys did even that research to see. So I think this is great, and thank you for the presentation.
I'm pretty concerned about the level of injury that's being reported here, and I'm wondering if we can get some additional reporting, potentially from our athletic director and others, about what's going on. You may recall that, you know, there was a point in time when the school district was considering getting rid of football because of concussion risks. We ended up getting rid of football because there just wasn't as much interest. Kids decided to play soccer instead of football. But our main job is to provide a quality education, and if we are doing things through our extracurriculars that are providing opportunities for permanent damage to our children, I, for one, would like to seriously weigh the consequences of that. Thank you. This is a terrifying presentation.
And I will agree, I totally agree, everything you said. Just to be super clear, in case anyone doesn't see this in front of them, that 90% of injuries among student athletes is like nationwide, not for our school. But also, still bad, and still like 5 injuries per game on the MRH girls soccer team.
But
I just want to
like
provide
like a slight sprain.
It could include slight sprain, right. It's not all career ending.
Yeah.
So they're basically just clumsy. Got it.
And I think the shin splints thing, you know, I know reported because of some of it's the track. It's not great. So there have been an increase in shin splints from that too. But definitely I think a trainer can help with how you take care of it and how you prevent it, right? So even just having someone to help you tape your ankle, you know, I don't think our coaches should have to do that, or poor Mr. Davenport. I think one kid got a tooth knocked out of the game. Like, oh, you know what? So a medical professional would be nice.
I mean, I'm not sure whether or not this is a appropriate time to be looking beyond, you know, our needs. You know, we're just had a 30-minute conversation about how we can't afford teachers, and now we're talking about providing other costs, which I'm not saying isn't necessary, like as far as if you want to, I mean, it's a good idea, I'm just not sure whether or not that's something that we can afford at this time.
I did put a note in. I appreciate it. Thank you, Maya. The districts that you cited, and so I do meet frequently with my colleagues to see how they go about doing it, and I do know that there potentially is a way that we might be able to partner. One thing I'm good at, Vince Estrada will tell you, is making a great ask and finding things for students and community without cost. So I'll do some research to see what I can make happen and get back for the report.
Great. Thank you. Okay, moving on, and you can leave if you want, because it's a school night.
Thank you, Maya.
All right, so we're going to go on to financials. Do we need to take a break?
So I was, if we can go through the financials for February and then maybe go back to answer the questions. I did have an opportunity to see some of the numbers that Jenny was looking at, and maybe Trent and Brian can help further clarify the questions and give Chris an opportunity to walk through those.
Sounds good. All right,
Awesome,
so
thank you.
We're going to do fiscal year January financial statements.
All right, let's jump into these. Here's the distribution of our revenue sources, noting that 78.7, which is roughly 79, or one could even round up to 80% of our revenue are from local sources. Through January, we were right around 17.2 million, or 60% of the budget. It is a decrease from what you see from the prior year, but we did receive a note from the county collector that the processing of the payments was somewhat delayed, partially due to the weather we experienced, and also due to some staffing issues that they've had, but they did give us an update on that, and we did receive those distributions just last week, and we received the second portion on Tuesday of this week. So we should be back on track, I believe, as we come into the February presentation of revenue. Moving into expenditures, we're right around 77% salaries and benefits across our human resources. You can see the distributions there for the other categories. So purchase services and expenditures, purchased service expenditures as of the end of January are right around $1.2 million, or 51% of the budget. That is higher. Supplies are comparable to the prior year, around $1.1 million versus the prior year of $1 million. Capital outlay, $309,000, $310,000 is at 77%, and that's higher than the prior year at 31%. And long and short-term debt, $56,000. That is our interest payment on the lease purchase. The remaining principal and interest payments will be made later in this year. Overall, operating expenses through the end of January are $14.3 million. And right now, we're right around that 33.9% fund balance budgeted for the end of the fiscal year.
Sorry, it was time for questions. I did notice, so does it look like we sold one of the properties?
We did sell one of the properties, yes.
Okay, just one of the two.
One of the two, and I believe the second one should be going on the market soon, yes? I've been seeing some paperwork go back and forth around that, so I'll talk about a little bit of that when we get to the budget amendment in a few minutes.
Great, thank you. Josh stepped out, so I guess anyone else? Nope. All right.
Okay, so let's jump into that budget amendment. Let me get this pulled up and shared, and we will roll through it. Oh, that's the budget, so we don't want to talk about that yet. Okay, I'm going to go to page 6 and note some of these, highlight some of these changes. So revenue, we are increasing Prop C revenue right now. That is coming in strong. That's one of the moving targets. It's adjusted each month as the payments are distributed from DESE. We are also increasing interest. We are invested. The majority of our operating, well, all of our operating deposits are in a mechanism that's earning us just right around 4% interest. So we do keep as much of our liquid capital over there to earn interest. So that is earning quite strongly right now. So we've increased interest there. When we get to our state revenues, we are increasing state grants and reducing basic formula. Basic formula is coming in a little bit below what we had estimated, and that as we get more clear information from the state and as they make adjustments, we will make further adjustments to that number. And in the federal revenues, we've made adjustments to the federal grants. Dr. Pichard's not here, but those grants change quite regularly, and as she gets those changes, we try to get those into the budget as soon as possible. On the expense side, you do see a reduction in salaries there. That's primarily due to a reduction in stipends. A number of the stipends came in less than what we had budgeted, not the least of which was home visits. There's a number of other stipends wrapped in there as well. We've also moved some consultant to salaries, and we had moved a significant portion of salary from our accounting position to consultancy, but once we were able to secure an accountant, we moved those back. And then we are also likewise moving bus driver salaries to purchase services, as we are still a bit understaffed on the bus driver side and were understaffed on the bus driver side and using first student to pad that difference. On benefits, those tie directly back to the decreases in salaries. And then on purchase service, slight adjustments to the sub-budgets. Overall, the sub-budgets are looking pretty good for the year. And then in the supplies, the biggest change here is when we initially started with Chartwell's, we budgeted all of the expenses of Chartwell's to purchase services. DESE has disagreed with that, and they would like us to split up the consultant pieces from the food costs. So we're right-sizing that. We learned that as we were preparing the ASBR for this past fiscal year, and that was after the budget was already locked in, so we're making that adjustment now. And we're also increases due to resource adoptions. The board did ask that we make some pretty drastic cuts last year. We did decrease some of the costs for the resource adoptions, those pilots. Those did not come in as low as what we were hoping they would, so we're making adjustments there. Overall, the budget operating budget is remaining right around that 33.9%. We will be making subsequent adjustments as the fiscal year progresses, as we get a clearer picture of what these revenues will look like, and probably some further adjustments to expenses as well.
Chris, can you talk about the question that Jenny asked in regards to the revenue from the purchasing of the house, which is showing up in the budget amendment as well?
Sure. Yeah, so we had, when Dr. Jameson and I were talking about the numbers that we should budget for those houses, we sold that first house for a little bit less than what we were hoping. However, we did sell it to a young family, I believe, who is moving into the district, and I believe they have children. They don't have children yet. Hopefully they'll have children, and we'll be able to partake of our wonderful experience here at MRH. Nevertheless, they are, it is good to return that back to the community in the form of residential housing as opposed to the public access as it was previously zoned. The New Visions house, I was speaking about this Student Success Center, the brick home there, and then the frame house just opposite on the other side of the street will be going up for sale within the next month, I believe, yes?
So where does that show up in the budget, I guess, when we?
That'll be in the, it'll be in the next presentation, but that goes into non-current revenue.
Okay.
So you'll see a 70,000, I believe it's 70,000.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, you'll see that reduction in what we anticipate the New Visions house to sell for, and then what we did net from the Student Success Center house.
And then, sorry, just a question about supplies.
Sure.
So you said some of the Chartwells came from purchase services.
Yes.
Does that help account for decreasing? How much of that is of Chartwells? Is it a significant amount?
It was about 250,000, I believe, is what we moved over there.
So with purchase services, was it budgeted in purchase services?
It was initially budgeted in purchase services, but we've made additional changes to purchase services, so things.
So we've spent the money other ways. So
Yes.
We're not getting anything back from that.
I wish we were.
Okay, that's just what I want to clarify.
Yeah. Yeah. The only way that we can, I think we're probably going to be right around where we budgeted as far as total expenses over supplies, purchase services for our food service program. It's still a little bit too early to tell. We're looking at the offsets for revenue related to student sales, and also those tied back to our state or federal reimbursements that we get through the state. All right, if nothing further, I'll jump into the budget update presentation 1. Okay, this is a very, very early look. Before I start scrolling through these slides and speaking to them, I don't even have reassessment numbers yet from the county. I won't get those until March, which means I have to do some wizardry to the tax rate calculators. So please don't hold me to these numbers. They are the best that I can do right now. All right, so right now, of course, Hancock, we received the lesser of CPI, which is loosely inflation, assessed valuation growth, or 5%. So right now, we are including in this particular presentation the 50% increase to the operating levy taken from the debt service levy. That would put the residential rates, please don't quote me on these are very preliminary, 3.9788 commercial 4.4764, and personal property at 5.9858. And these do not exclude the 85 cents of debt service, so that would be added on top of these. So this is just for our operating. If we do look at the operating, overall for operations and capital projects, because traditionally we have allocated 10 cents of our operating levy to capital projects, that would net right around $19.3 million, given the increase, the voter-approved increase that we are hopeful for come this April. And then debt service, as we split that apart, would be $3.8 million, which Lorenzo Boyd, these numbers align relatively close to where they have been talking to us over the last couple of months. And they assume a little bit different collection rate than I do. I tend to be a little bit more conservative, using some averages there, so right around that 97-98% collection rate. When we get to state funding, basic formula, we are looking at a bit of an increase, but again, we've already had to decrease some of our state formula, and we are getting signals from the state that perhaps the allocations that are in this year's current state budget won't be sufficient for what they've promised. Usually when that happens, they start pulling things out of, they make adjustments to the transportation budget, not the least of which is the transportation budget. So right now we are looking at about a $300,000 increase in our basic formula state money, a bit of a decrease on the basic formula classroom trust fund, and because they've lowered that state adequacy target again. And then the Prop C is our sales tax, just a slight increase in that, and that's probably a pretty conservative number, but again, it's just February, so as we move through the budget season, I'll update these each month as we go. So right now, looking at total revenue here, right around that $25.7 million. On local revenue, county revenue, just a little bit less from where it is. This again is a bit of a moving target, so I like to do this one just a little bit more on the conservative side because we don't really know what's going to happen here yet. State revenue, the increase is in front of you, and the federal revenue, expecting the sunsetting of some of those grants that we've been receiving, and also with some of the recent talk of cuts, we're also unsure of what's going to happen there. Non-current revenue, that's a pretty big number, so I already talked about non-current revenue includes our insurance restoration reimbursements, and it also, I don't know why they call it that, and then they also include the sale of homes, which I'm also not sure why that's non-current revenue, but that's what the state calls it, so that's how I've presented it. The $40,000, I know that we did receive a question about that. That's a holding spot. As Vince will tell you, these payments, it's really difficult for us to predict given our unhoused student population and where they will come from or where we'll send them. So when we receive revenue from those other LEAs, this is where that goes. And sometimes those also don't come in the proper current year. So we've been chasing down some of those revenues from a couple of districts, and I think that we might be all caught up on some of those. That's not to say that Mr. Estrada hasn't been very persistent in urging them to get those payments to us, but nevertheless, they've started to come in now.
Not the best bill collector.
I did have to step in and send an email, and then things started moving. A kind email. And here is just a historical look at revenues over time. 26, you'll see the dramatic spike there. 24 and 25, that's to be expected as we're in a non-reassessment year currently, moving into a reassessment year, plus the anticipation of the 50-cent increase to the levy. All right, so our next steps, I won't go through it, but I've put up the budget development calendar. So right now, as recently as yesterday and today, we are scrutinizing those building budgets before I turn those over to our superintendent for further scrutiny. That's when everything gets really fun. And then we are reviewing and updating position control, including extra duties, and we'll continue to review and update the revenue budgets as the information comes to us. And we have already started work on the budget document, mostly in the form of the master spreadsheet that feeds all of the schedules in that document. So there's a ton of work ahead. It's difficult work. It'll be nice this year to have a partner in that with our new accountant, Tony Arnzen. And He's been an incredible asset, and I'm looking forward to working through this budget. He also enjoys budgets, probably not as much as me, but we'll make a good team as we move through this process. Any questions?
Can you scroll back to slide 5, please? So
At this,
projected revenues.
Okay.
So I had asked about, I mean, it seems like we've been pretty inconsistent in our actuals for the LEAs. That's a fine explanation about why that is. It's hard to predict. I am not sure, you know, if we don't feel fairly confident that we're going to have $40,000, I'm not sure that I feel good about budgeting for that at this moment. So I don't need an answer now. I just want to say that I'm, you know, it doesn't sound like we're very confident that we're going to have $40,000 from LEAs. I also would love to hear more. I know that there is a lot in flux at the moment. I do understand that in January, we did have some federal funding accounts that were frozen. I believe that they have been unfrozen at this moment.
correct.
Can you remind us generally what our federal revenue buckets are from?
Sure, it's going to be our title revenue, Title 1, 2, and 4. It'll be our federal food sales reimbursements. It will be other federal grants that we've received over time. Right now, we've got the Afghan grant, we've got the refugee grant, we've got, I wish Dr. Bashar was here, she could rattle those off.
Those are the ones that are currently frozen, so I do want to say that, so I was waiting, so, and we got a smaller grant, but you have districts like Bayless who have upwards of $300,000 that
Sure, yeah.
they can't access, and we have, I think initially when the funds were frozen, we had about $380,000 that we were afraid of not being able to access.
Is there like a spool up cost? Like if we stop the program, and then is it more expensive to then restart what we've been doing in the past, or can we just jump right back in?
Which program, as far as the federal revenue streams?
Like, okay, for the LEAs, right? So, if we don't know how much we're going to have, you know, so we're not really budgeting ahead of time for those, is there a danger of not, you know, putting money in there, and just, you know, paying as we go, or is there sort of like a maintenance spool up cost that has
This is revenue.
No, I understand that, but what my point is that.
Do we have to buy back into some of these grants? Is that? Okay. No. It's either we get them or we don't. And the unfortunate thing about the title is, for the most part, our title, especially Title I and also Head Start, go directly to salaries. So those would hurt. I mean, we would have to then
pay out of our local
revenue in order to do that.
Salaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's kind of what I mean, is that, you know, so there is,
Right now, I think of the federal revenue as a supplement that offsets the cost of teachers. And if we lose it, then that supplement's gone, and then we have to find another way to fund it.
It's a fair amount.
Yes.
It's not an insignificant amount. And for a budget that is admittedly as small as ours,
Yeah, it's a big impact.
it's a big impact, indeed.
I think I would also just draw attention to the tenuousness of the state revenue as well right now, and that there is a lot of activity happening right now around messing with tax code in our state that will significantly impact the ability of local municipalities and school districts to fund themselves. And so, again, I know that some of our state level leadership purport to be supporters of education. However, their actions are not demonstrating that in the public school district space.
I think this past Thursday, I sat through a presentation from the state budget director, and one of my CFO contemporaries from another side of the county asked a pretty good question, which is, so you're suggesting, you're giving us all these numbers, but yet it doesn't feel like it's enough. And we were met with a response of, well, we've increased funding by X millions of dollars. And that's when everyone around the table is looking at each other, wanting to pound on the table and say, but that's not enough. So it was almost as if it was, you shouldn't be asking us for more, yet everybody's funding streams are different. The percentages of the distributions are different. So it's not apples to oranges as we look at all these various school districts. Benita mentioned Bayless, Hancock. You know, if you look at our distributions of revenue sources, they're very different. We're not super heavily dependent on our state revenues, as they're roughly right around that 8 to 10%, depending on the year. However, as I previously mentioned, as budget as small as ours, those numbers do impact us. So as we're petitioning our state representatives while they're using tax cuts and such, they will say that the formula is fully funded, but really it's just shifting things around within the funding formula to make things look the way they are. So I'm now at the risk of editorializing, so I will stop. But I will say that the state revenues, I am in absolute agreement that they are in flux. They are spending down their reserves as related to the ARP funds, and it looks like additional revenue may be directed toward the Medicaid program and not necessarily to schools. So
I mean, I guess, just to, summarize, we're basically on our own and nobody's coming to save us. We need to take care of ourselves.
Yes. Without putting too fine a point on it.
Yeah.
People being able to afford tax increases,
Yeah.
which many people are struggling.
Right. And again, I don't have a specific request in mind. I just think given that, the volatility, I would like some real clarity as we move forward in the budget season around how we are, what we are considering conservative budgeting in these spaces, given what we know.
And I do receive updates from the state every month in the form of their monthly financial memo, and they give us the numbers they're projecting for this year. They give us the numbers they're projecting for next year. So the numbers are usually pretty close to being on target. So right now I am using the numbers that they're providing. If you'd like, I can dial those numbers back a bit. We did receive a bit of a bump this year due to Senate Bill 727. One of the few benefits that came out of that was adding back in or subtracting back out of, depending on your perspective, local effort, and allowing us to receive additional funding as it relates to local effort. So somewhere around 600,000. So.
I just had a question about next steps. Were you wanting to say something?
I was just going to keep community informed about open enrollment. So if you haven't been following any of the bills and how that's actually the impact on districts, they've set a percentage threshold in regards to the number of students who are able to exit, which means you need to fill those gaps. And they have not yet figured out what the input-output would be from a tuition standpoint. So there are a number of things, if you're not following, coming out of the varying House bills and Senate bills that we need to also consider that have not been considered, which also includes transportation if open enrollment actually passes.
My question was, I see on the budget calendar, so February, well, we're in February, March, April, so will, like, in March and April, we might get some initial revenue or expenditure forecasting, and then we'll get the
As
whole-
complete as I can present.
Right, I
Sure.
know, it's all, yeah, okay, but that's what we'll do that in the next couple months. Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay, I think. Alright, of swing back now to questions that we'd had about the CBA, and maybe we could work through those. I don't know. How do you want to start that?
So I did provide Chris the questions that Jenny had about a couple items that we looked at, so maybe that's a good starting point. And then if Trent and Brian want to pose the questions and maybe give time to kind of walk through and make reference to the documents that we're talking about as we go through would be great.
So, Jenny, so if you could, the projections that I sent today.
Chris, can you put that on so that everybody can see it too as you talk through those?
When I left the table, I was looking at a different thing, so I'm not exactly sure what we're getting at on the revenue side. I wasn't prepared to speak to that, so.
Oh, that was just a question. I think whatever the number you have for in these that you sent today for projected revenue were like 400,000 less than what you just projected.
Well, I've also adjusted the budget, so these haven't been corrected for any of the adjustments, so.
Okay, so that just to know.
Yeah,
Okay.
and projections are projections, and as close as we can get.
Right, no, but we get them at the same time. I guess.
Sure.
So maybe if you drop a note.
And that was.
This was before that, and then we'll know that
Sure.
that's why they're off.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That was my only question there. I think
Great.
the numbers I just did based on what Trent and Brian were saying about them being lower.
At first we were.
We afford what is being presented.
Yes, and actually, yes, absolutely. And as I stated before, the projections are correct. I did find where the 3.79 or 3.079 million came from. I'm going to pull up the CBA presentation real quick. If you could, Shonda, I don't know that I have ready access to that.
Yeah.
And then go to the costs slide, please.
Okay. Give me a moment to get there.
So actually, the financial impact is a little better than what you saw the first time. You're in, I need you to be in the presentation itself.
Oh,
the
right,
PDF.
thank you. My bad.
All good. I probably wasn't clear.
No. I'm gonna log off just because I hate when people,
I see what you got up on your desktop.
I got lots. And let me just go to that slide.
This will be short, but I do want to show where the energy was. If you could go to, I believe it's that next slide, Shonda, slide 8. You don't have to present it, you can just
Okay.
do it from there. Okay, so what was happening, let's see. No, you actually may have
I
been.
was on the right slide, I think.
Yeah, here we go, right here. Okay, so what was happening is the cost of district was the benefits were being doubled. So if you look at the total cost there, the 1.4 and the 1.6, that was inclusive of benefits. So I've updated the schedule. So what you were seeing before was over-calculating the salaries, because it was salaries plus benefits again. So I've corrected that there, and here is that number, and those will more closely match the projections and the other schedules that I've presented.
So are you saying the 3.08 million is now the correct number for salaries plus benefits?
Indeed.
And before we were given a number of 3.8 million?
I'm not sure about the three.
That is the number. Well,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
So it's
That's
2.29.
plus 100,000 to make it 3.6 million was the original numbers.
Yes. And when you look at the financial projections for 26 to 32, that is inclusive of the cost of support staff increases and the administrator increases.
So then that then matches the numbers that are in.
Correct.
Can you show us just the number for salaries and just the number for benefits?
They're right,
It's over on the left,
right
in that
there.
pink box. Go all the way to the left.
It's that leftmost column. I was working as quickly as I could back there.
Oh, cost of district is the
Yes.
salary number? Okay.
Correct.
So now it's 2.2 million?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was over-calculating. So.
Okay. And that matches the numbers in here more closely. Okay.
So database to PowerPoint transcription error as
Indeed.
opposed to any
There's
sort
this,
of issue in the
Shonda, hover over that. You might not be able to do it, but if you, this is linked back to a spreadsheet, so,
Oh, I don't know if I'm gonna.
yeah.
Well, let's see if it'll take.
Oh,
me
don't
there.
touch it.
I was like, I don't want to break anything.
Hover, don't click.
I was like, I don't want to break anything. It's like, in real time, he died.
Does anyone have any questions on the numbers then?
I still don't understand how this number is correct. If the other numbers from December were for 10% and this is for 18%.
So I think it's kind of going back to the original ask, and we had already ran calculations and that information was shared previously with the board in closed session around the 11%, which was interesting because when they came with the 11%, I chuckled and said, I knew you were asking for 11%. So when the sheets were passed out during that meeting with the 11%, but when we did, it was two goals we were trying to do: become competitive, but also move into the third quartile. And when we did the scenarios for the 11%, it didn't move us to be competitively. And the union was not actually interested in doing a 2-year, but after we showed them how going into a 2-year based on Chris's scenarios, it got us closer to where we wanted to be, which was the third quartile. Because the first year would have been 11% plus a 2.75%, and being realistic, they would have come back the second year asking for yet another sizable raise. So we know what we can afford. Chris did a great job of that during negotiations to share about where we are, and we feel like the projections that we have give us enough time. We have been very clear about the acts to community in regards to address further needs, but we feel that the recommendation that's being placed in front of the board is actually doable. It addresses the competitiveness that we're trying to reach in the third quartile, as well as ensuring that we are being financially solvent and in a place where we can continue to operate as a district.
And we are, as we go through this budgeting process. We've upped the scrutiny that we're placing. Not that there wasn't scrutiny before, but we've added additional layers. We've asked our principals and directors to prioritize the line items that they're asking for, which has been a bit of a strain. We've also asked them to tie them back to either the strategic plan and or their building plans that you just heard them give updates on. I wanted to hear them do that because I need a better understanding of what those building plans are, and if they're not able to do that to justify that expense, then it doesn't go in the budget. That's pretty much the long and the short of it. So as Dr. Jameson and others go through those budgets, those are the conversations we'll be having.
And I will say that we have made reductions in areas, and then also we talked about positions based on attrition that have not been filled as a means to close some of the gaps. But I would also say that as we've looked at the budgets, when I meet with principals monthly, and based on what they identify to purchase, if they have not purchased items, for example, I'm just going to use math manipulatives that were supposed to be purchased at the onset of the year, it's the middle of the year and they haven't purchased them, that money has been pulled back and placed in a contingency fund to give us a better idea of whether or not we're over budgeting. So we do have some new mechanisms put in place to address some of the concerns that the board has raised.
And I've got a couple of other ideas that we won't get too deep into the weeds on to look for some consolidation of some expenses that are happening individually in all of the various locations in the building, consolidating that so we can experience some efficiencies. So we've got quite a few strategies that we're looking at.
Because one of the assumptions in here factors in cutting $1 million, so I want to remember that.
Well, and a big portion is the CBE grant. I mean, let's not forget that was a $400,000 grant. So there's $400,000 of expenses distributed.
So we also got $400,000 of revenue for it, right? So it's
distributed
sort of
over the
like
past 2 years, but well, sort of, yes. In a sense, yes.
I did have a question about the combined rate. So in the year when you're combining, do you have an idea of sort of what percentage we combine out to? Because
combining.
Well, so you're doing some staff at 6% and some at 9% based on where they are. So like what percentage does that have we based on where our teachers are at?
You know where they are, but.
You know, like
I can answer
what combined,
percentage.
because what I'm noticing is you're adding 8% in year one, and it's about $1 million. But then you're adding another 6 to 9, and it's only 1.2, but you're adding it on top of that. So I'm curious, it's only about a $200,000 difference, so I'm wondering, to me, that means that that percentage must trend lower between the 6 and the 9, or?
So the way I do these, I calculate the cost of the schedule.
Right?
So the way that works is, I'm going to give you a peek into this world for a second, but I take the position of the salary schedule of every single teacher that we have, and I plug that into the salary schedule, do the multiplication, that generates the numbers for us. And then in the next year, I will move everybody down and collect them on that last step. Yes, and that gives us the number. So let's say we have 24 steps on master's through PhD right now. So if you have a teacher that's on step 24, they're going to stay on 24 as I project the next year. And then 23 will move to 24.
Right, so you're
But what that does is it gives me room then to assume on new entry points, because it's always going to cost more for a teacher to stay on the same step twice than it will to bring in a new teacher at a maximum of step 15. So that builds me a little bit of grace, if you will, or pad on the projections of these expenses for salaries.
Can I ask the board chair to have staff update the document in the agenda with now the correct numbers?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, flip it now. Sure.
Oh, didn't.
So I believe I'm done.
Attachments that are on Simbly.
Yeah, he has the ability, he's a super
Okay,
user, so I was just telling him to go ahead and make the adjustment while we're here.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns, comments? Thank you, Chris.
You're very welcome.
Board communications discussions. The calendar of events. Believe it or not, February is almost over. And other things coming up that I see on my calendar, there might be some building stuff that's going on. If we look at the perpetual calendar, just a reminder that that is how we build out the agendas. If anybody has anything that they wanted to add, as far as looking for policies, you know, if you could look at the perpetual calendar. I mean, obviously not right now, but or if you did have something right now, then now would, I think, be the appropriate time to add it during the meeting. I will remind us that we are planning on having sort of a policy review at our board retreat, so we're going to kind of go over all of the stuff that we maybe have not gone over together in mass, and I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's going to be a pretty good presentation. We're having some individuals from MSBA come in, and they're going to educate us. All right, so then, let's see, board report.
So, well, just to clarify, I think something what we talked about was using this space on the agenda for people to bring up agenda items they would like on a future meeting.
Which,
So,
yeah, that's what I said.
well, I just didn't know if it was clear that we were going to do that every month. Like
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
okay.
That's the idea.
So if
is-
someone has something for March, they would like Trent, you previously asked for something that was moved. And I think the agreement was to March, but do you still want that on March?
I think that it'd be worthwhile talking about the legal services policy. I can't remember what the name of BCG maybe was the policy.
Is the request from the board that administration bring back a draft for the board to react to?
No, just we're looking at the policy.
Yeah, I think we
Okay.
should talk about it.
Anything else? And again, you know, we are going to have an opportunity to sort of go over, to take a deeper dive into our policies at the retreat, which I think is on the 8th. So that would be prior to our next meeting. So I'm sure stuff might come up during that meeting too. And, you know, it's try to figure it in, or factor it in, or whatever. Let's see where we are now. Did the PAL thing? Okay, so committee reports, anybody got anything that they want to report?
Community roundtable
You skipped,
update.
yeah, community roundtable.
Did I? Where are we? Oh, I did, you're right, I'm sorry. There's a community roundtable update. So, does anybody have anything they want to update about that?
I thought it went well. We had good conversation at our table. I think one thing that came up that was sort of different than what a lot of people came up with was a community member asking about, community, having further input if we do pass the bond, having input on what, community would like that money spent on. So I think that was a good idea, so something to consider. And I wanted to commend Junior Kara Thomas for getting up and speaking, sharing her thoughts. I think that's really hard to do, especially in a room full of adults. So I thought that was great to hear her perspective. So I wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder, Jenny. One of the things we did touch on at the roundtable was, the draft list of projects for that could be included in the bond. I don't know that it's been mentioned yet already this evening, but we are expecting a more comprehensive report on our facilities. I think they were overly ambitious, thinking it was going to be ready for this meeting since we only approved it happening at the last meeting. But it does seem as though we will get that in the not too distant future, which I think will give us more data with which to bring forward opportunities to get community input.
And I think one of the other takeaways from these community roundtables in general is it is a little bit of an echo chamber. Most of the people I think that were there do sort of support it, and we have to figure out ways to reach those people that either don't know what's going on or maybe are skeptical, which is going to require some legwork. Any suggestions that anybody in the community has about ways that we could, provide additional clarification. We are all, I think, have a vested interest in making sure that this passes, and I know that a lot of community members are devoting a lot of their time and energy to doing that, and if there's any way that we can make it more efficient, or if people are hearing questions, or if there's sort of a common question or theme that's coming up that we can figure out a way to address, love to do it. All right. Anything else about the community roundtable? All right. Now we're going to move on to committee reports. Let's see. For community, I don't know who's on that. Oh, right. So Linda is excused from today's meeting. Yeah. All right. Let's see. We've got for our health.
That's me.
Okay.
So we met on the 4th. Mr. Shabbat, let me know if I missed anything. So we talked about the culture and climate survey and some improvements that were made. There's a separate survey for support staff now. And then the parent survey had some questions that are now optional. So it kind of, we had good participation. We think that might be part of it. We did talk a little bit about possible, survey fatigue and maybe looking at ways that we can do the survey like at parent-teacher conferences or something like that, as a method to kind of generate participation. We talked about some key performance indicators. One of the things that we talked about specifically was a metric for staff health. We talked about how staff attendance was kind of something that we were using, but we were talking about moving away from that to look at other ways that we can measure staff health. We also talked about the school health index. The most current scores from 2021 and the triennial evals kind of do, it's a self-assessment. Things look good there. And then we also talked about updates to the social emotional curriculum for the middle school and high school and kind of what that could look like, the rollout and the determination of which program to use. We talked about student-led groups. They were going to meet with a social worker from Washington University on February 5th to talk about student-led groups to research Tier 1 curriculum. And then we talked about the certified restorative practice trainers that provided some training on January 17th at the PD through the conference-style PD. They did 3 sessions, I believe, to train people on restorative practice. Is that right? All right, nailed it.
I'm next.
All right.
Just go.
Yes, please.
I'll let Dr. Ambrose Phillips interrupt me when I'm wrong here, but we covered a lot. It was great. We had good participation, and we had our 2 students show up this time for the first time, which was awesome. So we talked about a universal evaluation tools. So I think there's one for certified and for non-certified, creating one evaluation tool. They have been evaluating 2 different ones, and I think have decided on one, and I think it was the free one, right? Yes. But anyway, that was the one they liked better, so I think they're working through it. There's they have a grant for professional development that Dr. Ambrose Phillips got, which is great to help with it, and then they're hoping to bring it to us in March or April, the final tool for approval or study. And then we talked about some data. One of our students asked great questions, which was always nice to see. And then we are going to dive in for next time. Our committee basically had it scheduled, so all tasks, all 40 of them were completed in the first 2 years, which is not, that is not tenable. So so she and Dr. Bouchard have gone through and sort of picked which ones in what order, so we're gonna, as a group, look at them and talk about that next time, if that makes sense, you know, where to move them in the year. So, did I get it?
You did.
Okay. Thank you.
For resources.
We had a meeting in late January, I can't remember exactly when, but we went through the list of capital projects and talked a little bit about the new maintenance sort of consultancy that's going to be looking at data, and we decided to have another meeting on March 10th so that we could look at that report and talk about what came out of it.
For students. You want to go?
Sure. Josh and I sit on that committee. Earlier this meeting, we approved in the consent agenda the data sharing agreement that is actually part of what this committee has been working on related to our Success Ready Students Network. There are particular data points that every Success Ready school district is required as part of their participation to share, and Marzano Research is generating those data dashboards. But we will not be satisfied with just those data points, and so this committee is working through a variety of other desirable information points that we can post on our website to more fully tell the story of an MRH experience and our portrait of a graduate. So that is continuous work here. There is plenty of information already on the district's website about our Success Ready student work, and we will continue to report back on that with input from community members on that committee, and I believe the next community conversation is also focused on that topic for additional community members to learn about and ask questions about that development in public education.
Yeah, so I would encourage the community to, in preparation of that meeting, to go and look back at some of the previous posts. There is, as Katie puts it, a great deal of information there about that, and it is it's a hard topic to just walk in on the day of and be like, all right, go. So I think that, you know, doing a little bit of homework would be helpful to have a meaningful conversation. And I think that is all
I have one more report from the St. Louis County School Board PLC advocacy group. We meet monthly to receive updates across a number of school districts on what's going on in Jeff City. We've already mentioned a few things. Kudos to MRH admin for welcoming in the new commissioner of education recently into one of our buildings, although I know that their schedule was slightly different in reality than what they had projected. So our elementary students and teachers got the benefit of that visit, as opposed to our high school students, who I know were very prepared for a presentation to state level leadership about what we do. There is obviously lots going on, and one of my questions to this board is if we would like to take some sort of stance on either tax policy changes that are being proposed and or open enrollment efforts that are happening. Many of these bills are moving quickly. Jerry Hockman, who is the former superintendent who is advising this PLC and providing information, has offered to do some deep dives, like maybe a 30-minute lunch session on taxation or other issues of interest if folks would like to communicate those desires to him. But we've seen the past couple of years that there has been some joining forces of local districts who have, discussed their positions on various topics, able to send joint letters or, joint requests to our state legislators about how we would like them to handle things like tax policy or open enrollment. So maybe not tonight, but I think it is something that we should discuss, whether we'd like to be proactive about that or merely receive whatever happens in Jeff City.
And Katie, just, for my own personal clarification, can you explain, a little bit about exactly what open enrollment is and isn't, what it's I feel like there is a underlying sort of reason that people are advocating for it that isn't necessarily the advertised reason for why they're doing it, and it just kind of, if you can give me the official talking point and the reality of what it does.
I think that it's not secret information that different districts in our state, there are more than 500 school districts in our entire state, have different levels of academic success and rigor for their students. I believe everyone is doing the best they can with the resources that they have in their communities. But as we have seen with some of the things that happened, within this last decade, when Normandy and Riverview were unaccredited, those students were able to choose to enroll in other school districts because their districts were unaccredited. The move right now is to offer any student in any district around the state to make a choice to move to another district where their family is not paying into the taxes in that local area. There is, this has been something that has been coming for many years, a push to let kids, enroll in any district. And I think that while there may be some positive intent around that, there is also a lot of challenges for school districts to be able to budget and predict and train for different needs of different communities. I think the increasing focus on attendance as a predictor of how much revenue you receive from the state, when you have to travel further to go to school, is your attendance, as high as it would be if you were going to your local school? There's just a lot of more questions, I think, than answers around this, but I think there is some sense that it is an effort to ultimately defund public education, or, certainly injure it enough that it falls apart.
So is it sort of like the precursor to school choice that it's sort of a test pilot, like a pilot program for it?
There are also bills right now around using public tax dollars to pay for private and parochial school vouchers as well. You know, that continues to be a priority of some of our state legislators.
So yes, Katie.
Great, yeah,
Yes.
we should talk more
Katie,
about
is it, am I remembering correctly when I read that law on open enrollment, it does limit it to a certain percentage of a district? I think is it 3%?
There is one bill, I think in one of the chambers that says 3, the other says 5 right now, and, you know, again, who knows what, I think there's a lot of caveats that are being put on to say like, oh, well, but it would only be, and only if you could take those students, but,
There are
you
some
know,
other
yeah,
restrictions.
yeah. That's it.
Thank you.
So we did have a Joe's Place meeting
Yes.
last night, if I can, okay, thank you. So Trent and I attended a virtual Joe's Place meeting, which was nice. So not a lot, we're just we set up our meetings for the year, you know, went over the financials like always. We're working on updating the bylaws. There was a good turnout for the fundraiser in February, and so that was really fun. I went, it was fun. It was live music and food. It was a great time. But mark your calendars for Saturday, May 3rd for the second annual disc golf tournament. So that will be the next fundraiser. So I just want to put that out there so you can put it on your calendars. But Trent, did you have anything else? No?
No, I don't think so. It's good summary.
All right. Any other committee reports? All right, school board election updates. So, as many of you know, there isn't really going to be, I mean, there will be names on the ballot, but there are 2 open positions and there are 2 candidates. So, if you're mathing, that means that there will be, you know, 2 people that were running that will also be on the board. But we also like to have the students lead a forum for people that are coming onto the board or people that are running. We've had a lot of success for that. This year, we're kind of deciding whether or not we want to split it between the regular candidate forum and also have an opportunity for the kids to talk about the props B&E, which I think would be a good idea. There's been some ideas sort of floating that we would have a slide presentation kind of floating in the background, some of the greatest hits of the things that need to be repaired in each of the buildings as we kind of go through, and I think that would be a good opportunity to explain. I mean, to me, it's a good opportunity to sort of demonstrate like what our MRH students, how they interact with the community, and also to sort of have them take some agency for what's going on. Anyway, if anybody has any thoughts or ideas about that.
What was the date that we were?
I do know. It's April 2nd from 6:30 to 8. And they are all prepared and planned already, so I just want to say that. So they do have a split. They have a portion of it is what they're recommending to be a candidate forum to at least give the opportunity for the 2 candidates, even though they're not running, to kind of share their platform, and then a fireside chat, which will be facilitated by our amazing students with the board asking questions about the prop. And I believe they still want to give an opportunity for community to be able to submit those questions. So this will be our 3rd year doing it. I am super proud to call those Big Blue Devils our kids, but they continue to model what's capable and how we're educating our kids. So I'm excited about that.
And also, you know, in no small part to our teachers who also teach them how to be analytical, how to organize their thoughts, how to give presentations. So, yeah, none of this stuff happens in a vacuum.
Can we confirm with both candidates that date?
Yeah, that would be helpful. I have not received any invitation.
You might want to check.
So I love that people have a
Miss
date already in mind,
Francois.
but no one's asked if it works in my schedule, so I don't know if it works for.
Just met with them last week, so we've been out
Okay.
for slow days. So just
So that's a tentative date.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
their schedules permit to have that day. So I
And
should
if
say that.
not, you know, then we can still just do the props, so, you know, win-win.
Okay, before we move into action items, we have an additional action item. I'm also wondering, do we need to add an action item around the allocation of funds for instructional materials? Is that is not?
So it was brought forward just for study, and we
Just
were
for
going to bring it
study.
for action. But if the board would like to amend the agenda, I see Chris is over there thumbsing up.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like
Fine with that.
it's, an important piece to have those manipulatives sooner rather than later. So I'd like to move to amend the action items for a second time to include the adoption of instructional materials for illustrative math.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? All right, great, motion passes. Okay, so we are going down to action items. The first one is the budget amendment. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve the budget amendment as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Collective bargaining agreement, number 2.
Motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement 2025 to 2026 and 2026 to 2027 as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Is this committing us to spend this money?
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
I really think we should table this approval until we have numbers that we can be sure of.
Call for the vote.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I oppose.
Okay,
You too,
all right.
for the reasons stated.
Sorry, were you voting on his motion to table?
No.
No,
The
I was
clo-
motioning on,
the
I was
open
voting on
amendment.
the,
Okay. Okay, so did we call for a second on his motion?
No, the motion is to approve the collective bargaining agreement. We have a first from Jenny, a second from me. That was discussion.
Okay. Oh, I
And
thought he
now-
was asking for a motion to table.
No, we're calling on this motion.
all right, so do we have to do this again?
Well, if he's making a motion to table, we have to wait for a second. If there's no second, the motion fails, and then we can move on to the vote.
No, we
I
have-
motion to
I think we
table.
already called a motion.
We have an
You to
open
answer
motion.
that motion
Yeah.
first. So
Yeah.
we would, in order to hear his motion to table, you would have to.
Okay. All right, that's fine.
All right.
So
Did you have some discussion, something you want to say further?
No,
Brian?
no, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't say I approve, I didn't vote in favor of the,
Okay.
because I thought we were voting on the motion to table, which,
So the open motion is a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement. All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, all right.
Motion passes.
All right, and then we've got one more item.
So the extra motion on, that Trent would like to make about legal.
Motion to send legal services out to bid.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
I oppose. Motion passes.
All right, sounds perfect. All right, and then we are going to,
Motion to approve the purchase of math materials for illustrative mathematics.
Second.
Oh, we already did this. Oh, we just put it on the agenda, okay.
so any discussion? No? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, all right, so
Motion to enter executive session for personnel matters.
Second.
okay, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Aye.
Is it-
Colbert?
Aye.
Mr. Matz?
Yes.
Ms. Martinez? Yes. Ms. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
All right, thank you, meeting adjourned.
Kid, can we get a picture with the union?
Yeah.
It's gonna be long.
Yeah,
I bet you $5 on that one. You said it's gonna